All right, good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing? Everybody get their coffee, breakfast? Welcome. Anyway, my name is Tom Suter. I am the president of the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. I'll be your host today. And I think this topic, cybersecurity features built on zero trust, is absolutely perfect for today. I remember a few years ago, we started Zero Trust Journey, and we were talking about AI. And almost every single discussion that I've ever been in, when you're talking about cybersecurity, you're talking about how you're using AI. And the good part is every AI discussion, we're talking about the security of it. And at ATARC, we're a member company. If you're a member company, just raise your hand if you're an ATARC member. There we go. Welcome. A lot of this discussion has been going on, and we have a series of working groups that we do at ATARC, and one of them we just did, the last one we did was, cyber AI convergence. So this is great that we're having this conference to talk about it today. I'd like to thank our industry partners. They're back there. I haven't checked out the swag game. They're usually pretty good at that. But a lot of the government folks that I deal with, that's where they do their market research. So if you are a government person or a partner, they'll be able to talk to you. We try to encourage them to bring in some technical folks that can help you out there. What else do we have? So we're going to go right into it. Our first power panel that we're going to have, Anna Pettijohn, who's Executive Vice President of Product and Strategy at GovExec, is going to be leading us. And she's got her people come up. You guys want to all come up? We'll just get this thing rolling. Give her a round of applause. Okay, there you go.
Excited. I get to stand up here with a great group of panelists. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Pettijohn, and thanks so much for being here this morning, bright and early. I was thrilled to be part of the first panel because I got out of preschool drop-off. So welcome. So as we all know, we're here today to talk Zero Trust. And obviously, Zero Trust is more than just a compliance mandate. It's a proactive framework for strengthening federal cyber and long-term resilience. I have a great group of panelists here to talk about what that actually looks like in practice. How do you adopt Zero Trust principles into complex and legacy environments? And how do you integrate these modern tools like AI and automation to protect data more effectively, evolve security models, and continue to keep mission-critical operations moving? So with me today, I have four great panelists. We'll start with Daniel Buckles, Red Cell Section Chief with State. We also have Dave Raley, Chief Digital Business Officer with the U.S. Marine Corps Community Business. We have Dr. Justin Hubert, Director of the Cyber Protection Division within the Office of the CISO at Transportation. And then last but not least, we have Mike Colson, Director of the Public Sector Growth piece of Akamai. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. We're going to get started just to kind of lay the groundwork. So obviously, Zero Trust has really evolved from a buzzword to a mandate and now to implementation. So would love for this group to kind of kick off, talk a little bit about your role, where you're at within your organizations and what you're seeing when it comes to translating Zero Trust principles into day-to-day operational decisions, and if there are specific strategies or practices that have been more effective, especially in this managing legacy environment. So, Dave, do you want to get it started? Nope. Daniel, do you want to get started?
Sure. I'll start off because I guess I have kind of the different perspective, right? I run a team of penetration testers and red teamers that basically our job is to come and evaluate the network. So I've had the experience. I've run this team for 15 years. 15 years now. So I've had a chance to see as Zero Trust has become a buzzword and then has become reality across organizations, in particularly my department. We've seen the difficulty level of what we're trying to do get harder. That's always the intent, right? And I'm probably the only person in government who's basically happy when my people are frustrated and angry that they can't get they're not actually doing it, and I'm happy when they come with a report that says we couldn't do anything, and that's a great scenario to be in. So what we're seeing is as the concepts of Zero Trust move along inside the department and get adopted in different levels and become part of the way that they do business, it makes our job harder and harder. So the level of effort that my guys have to actually take to get into these systems is getting harder. So that's the, I mean, and that's the, in the end, that's the intent. We want to make it harder for the adversary to get into our systems. And we're seeing that every part of the department we have a plan, and they've been taking action on that plan, moving forward. And every year I'm seeing less and less of the easy stuff that used to happen, and more that we have to work, and that in the end, that's what causes the bad guys to actually have to spend more time getting into our systems too. So I'm actually really pleased with the way that Zero Trust has been incorporated into organizations and become kind of a foundation. So
Dave, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about your role and what you're seeing in the space.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Thank you, ATARC, for having me here. Good morning, everyone. Dave Rayleigh. I run Operation Stormbreaker primarily, which is one of the Marine Corps' only, or it's the Marine Corps' only certified DevSecOps platform and hosting capability. We help mission owners achieve both the hosting and authorization outcomes in as little as 15 minutes. And so Zero Trust for our organization and for our platform is a key operational and security mechanism. So we look at Zero Trust maybe a little bit differently. We had a privilege of being able to start Greenfield in 21 or so when we started building out the enclave and getting started, and we built it and designed it with all the DOW CIO office guidance around CATO, Zero Trust, Aware Advanced Zero Trust, and of course DevSecOps and all those things. So by doing that, we see this as a key thing. So I'll give you a couple practical examples. Obviously, one of the Zero Trust principles around account segmentation and using AWS's multi-account structure as a key security practice allows us to support mission owners with diverse mission sets, everything from my own organization, Marine Corps Community Services, and public-facing capabilities. I don't know if our friends at Akamai were tracking that we are big consumers of their capability to help protect our IL-2 traffic in our environment. And leveraging AppGate is another core part of our Zero Trust capability, along with Akamai, some Palo Alto capability, a bunch of AWS native services. We have the Marine Corps' only authorized cloud native access point. And so some of those things that I just mentioned really are key ways that we can help enable mission owners to interconnect interoperability across different networks in the Department of War with different diverse mission owners, and then have warfighter capabilities right next to IL-2 environments. But of course, if you're using the hub and spoke model from a security perspective within your architecture that allows you to consume those security management services without having all of your accounts running in the same environment. And being able to use those capabilities has really been an operational enabler and helps us from a security perspective. And it gives us the ability to have each mission workload have its own distinct authorization within that context, and that allows us to have we aren't impacted by one mission owner's ability to meet their ATO versus another, and so that allows us a lot of flexibility as we support diverse mission sets.
That's great. Justin, you want to share a little bit about what you're working on at Transportation?
Certainly. So we are in the middle of the One DOT initiative, right? So we're consolidating, especially from the IT perspective in the Department of Transportation. So IT is shifting from fragmented shops within the sub-agencies and the Secretary's office into a cohesive organization underneath the OCDIO. It's the Chief Digital and Information Officer, right? And that title has changed to showcase that modernization and integration effort that we're doing with One DOT. So, as you might expect, that means that we have some work to do from a fragmented perspective, right? We're trying to pull all this together. So we kicked off with the work of looking at our tick patterns, right? Tick 3.0 and those types of patterns. We then looked at our capabilities across our environment and what we can offer to our customers, and are looking at integrate that into a service catalog that allows us to similarly offer this Zero Trust environment where our goal is to get our customers to bring their workloads and just be able to do what they got to do, right? They come in, everything's secure, it's agile, it's flexible. We don't have to. I really like how you said it. diverse mission sets and diverse workloads, we don't have to worry about, per ATO in terms of like, what are your security requirements and do we have to, make something super cool and super different for you? We have a set capabilities that are based on the Zero Trust framework that allow for us to bring those workloads in and then just start, managing. So by default, we are working towards the maturation of that secure, environment that you could just bring your workloads. So that's where we're going with it. I also liked what Dan was saying about the red team. So I one of my first roles was as a red teamer, and I best job I ever had. Very, very, very in line with the frustrated days. So when I had bad days, I knew that somebody was doing their job well. That's also another factor, though. And I wanted to kind of tie into the value that that type of engagement brings, because we have a requirement as well to ensure that there's ground truth testing. And the way you do that is to actually test, right? It's not just compliance. We're not looking at a bunch of scans and saying, hey, I think I'm okay because, our scanner doesn't show any vulnerabilities for this thing at this time. Adversarial testing against the network, against our public endpoints, and seeing if they can breach and pivot in, lets us know where we're doing things right and wrong, and that gives us a dynamic way to start fixing things and really test the boundaries of our zero trust efforts. So as a former red teamer, and I'm a big fan of that kind of work because it helps validate what we're doing and ensure that we're going down the right path and we're robust, right, resilient, and that's the point. So
Perfect. And would love to hear the industry perspective from Mike. Can you share a little bit about what you're seeing work well in across agencies or within organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. And anyone here who knows Akamai is probably thinking, why is there a content delivery network person sitting on a zero trust panel, which is fair. But if you think about the way that we've developed our capability, it's a global platform that operates across 146 countries and provides the ability to actually do a break and inspect at the very edge where the end user is. And over the years, we've developed additional capabilities within cybersecurity that really drive beyond what Zero Trust was trying to accomplish. Because Zero Trust is, I think, Dan said it best, it was a buzzword initially. It was this effort that was underway to create an artificial truth that said, hey, we're not going to trust anything. But under the covers, you're always going to create some level of trust. And that's why we think we're really kind of moving beyond that and looking at least permissive. Because when you have the ability to look at the session state, the device posture, the authentication pathways, as well as controlling the actual authentication mechanisms and policies and governance that overlay it, you're able to get into a very granular access control that creates a set of vignettes and policies that are able to be applied regardless of not just the way that users trying to access the application, but actually through the transaction itself. So I can track and mirror each click that user is doing and see whether or not what they're requesting access to, they have the permissions to do, and whether or not their attributes map to that. So when I think about where this is going, right, things that you might not know that Akamai is doing today, we've been operating a private CDN within the DoD at multiple classification levels for over 20 years. We've been doing Zero Trust well before Zero Trust was actually called Zero Trust. And that's why we have the capability to do these things where we talk about least permissive. We're authenticating 45 million users on average. We're looking at over 6,000 applications. We break every TLS connection that's being looked at on those protected applications, and we can track each session, each authentication. And the way I think about it, we used to talk about defense in depth and building the gates, guns, and guards, and then looking internal. Well, we don't just have the foresight of, because we do track 2/3 of the world's internet traffic across Akamai's platform, but we also have the ability to look at how bad actor patterns occur at the edge, create policies that are logically enforced across all of our network in near real time, and then as the user's managing and moving through the authentication process, we can look at that device. Is that device accessing it from a network that is a known network, or is that user operating in a coffee shop that day because they had the ability to work remote? Is it an authorized device, or is it a BYOD situation? We can lower or raise the authentication level for that user and authorization level based off of those pieces, and then known time, known systems, like what is the pattern for this user, and then not just apply it once and done, right? Like a lot of zero trust under those CISA pillars. I like the fact that it was organized, but it creates a bunch of IT silos. We don't just look at the one silo. We look all the way across and we say, hey, how does this apply to the user, and not just allow for that gate guard to sign off when the user authentication is done and passed into the system, but actually assign a guard to follow them around, look at the filing cabinet that they're looking at, make sure that the file that they're looking at, they're authorized to see. And so that's how we've been applying this across DoD for the better part of a decade and a half. And it's how we support a lot of our federal, civilian, and commercial customers as well.
That's great. A lot of different perspectives, and I think great way to start the foundation here. So there is always a risk of turning zero trust into a reporting exercise. So I'm curious, what are some of those risks when we focus too much on the compliance of it all? And how can agencies really ensure they're building real resilience instead of just checking the boxes? Dave, I'm going to start with you just because where you're at in your journey, and I'm sure you have some best practices to share.
Yeah, I think that's a really critical way to think about this, Anna. So if you take the perspective that this is just merely an inconvenient compliance element that you have to somehow figure out how to do, you're going to fight and struggle. What I see, again, privileged because we got to start greenfield, so I acknowledge that when you're working on building out from legacy and converting legacy, that's a real challenge, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how we made that conversion. But the critical thing is understand the operational resiliency and the ability of how it feeds into your security as a key enabler, as opposed to something that's a stressor for you, or this is compliance. And honestly, I look at RMF the same way, because I mean, that's the same issue. Traditional RMF, legacy RMF, through snapshot in time, data-centric approach, multiple months, 12 to 18 months, at a huge cost, as an approach to security, as opposed to data-centric, near real-time. In our case, we can get authorizations achieved through our container pipelines in 15 minutes. Then you're actually talking about blowing away the container and reauthorizing it again the next night. So if a malicious actor gets a foothold. So it's that same principle, I think, applied to zero trust as is not a restriction or a compliance approach, but really view it as an enabler for mission capability.
That's great. Any other thoughts from the gentleman from your experience?
Yeah. So when I'm thinking about the word compliance, yeah, everybody lately sees it as a dirty word, and I don't necessarily disagree. Right? It's we do compliance. One of the reasons I think we've had to do compliance over the many years in federal government is because it was a big driver, right? If you're compliant, this is the way to get your dollars to move your program forward, and so you sort of reinforce that checkbox mentality. But that's I like that you said legacy RMF in there, because what I think we're really getting back to is what the actual intent of RMF and those were, which is a risk management framework, not a compliance management framework, right? So when I kind of look back at what the intent was and where we got to, I can see why. But we have a very clear mandate from the top down right now in this administration and definitely within DOT, which is we need to be getting away from a compliance mindset. We need to be working towards agile, and I say agile in the way of like acrobats, not a framework that is a buzzword. Right. We need to be agile with our workloads to get these things out the door. We have our CDIO wants to see if we can't get it done in 3 to 6 months, not interested. We want it now. We want it fast. We want it delivered. We're looking at a product-centric mindset. So we have to support that. And the way to do that is to ensure that we are looking at things from a risk perspective. And what I mean by risk perspective is, look at what we've got going on, balance the risk against what's going on in the environment. But if we build a great environment that's resilient and already has a bunch of controls that you can just bring your workloads to and we're ready to go, then we're already building the security in. They bring the workloads and we are ready for them. That's the idea and the point of how we're trying to push our zero trust maturation forward, right? So we've got to be dynamic. We've got to get these things rolling out the door. There's no more time. And these 18-month turnarounds for ATOs and things like that they have to be in the past. We've got to deliver now. So zero trust is, for me, again, we're going away from buzzword stuff. I look at it as a modernization. We're modernizing the environment, and the way that we do that is through this resilience, and we're making sure that we have just-in-time permissions, and folks are accessing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. And if we don't see all that context, they're not. And if there's a problem there, we go and fix it dynamically and quickly, right? So that's what we're looking at.
Justin, I would add to the compelling factor, and I think there's some misunderstanding very often of there's a trade-off with speed and compliance and security, and we provably have shown actually far more security and far better compliance moving at speed that is realistic. You would think that if you spent 18 months going through everything and documenting it all, somehow that would be more secure, but provably it's not. When you take a deep look in a container in a build process that's authorized to certify the RMF through automation in 15 minutes, built on a zero trust capability and deployed there, you're getting a far better look at the actual risk posture of your capability every night than a 3-year paper-based ATO that really is almost not worth what it's printed on the day that it's signed.
Yeah.
I would say that compliance is a great goal. I mean, it's good to aim for, just as a baseline. But the problem is compliance generally leads to complacency, and that you are talking about an environment. You're taking a snapshot of time that's very finite and saying that you're good for the next 3 years in an ATO, and that's just completely unrealistic in the threat environment that we're in, where the vulnerabilities are coming out faster and faster than we've ever seen them before, and that the exploitations of those actions are occurring so much faster. So just saying that you've done that and that now you can step back and just kind of rest on your laurels, that's kind of
that assumes, Dan, that compliance is the outcome we're seeking, which we're
It
not.
isn't. It
right?
isn't. No,
the compliance is the mission enablement, and that's what we want to do in a secure and resilient way.
Right.
And the compliance is a measurement of that. It should be more of the outcome or the output as opposed to the outcome you're seeking.
Right. Yeah, then that's fair. But I mean, at least it's a minimum, right? It's a bare minimum that you should do. But the problem is that then you just stop and put down the pen and be like, you're good, and that's awesome. Except the adversary laughs at that.
Yeah.
So.
And it's that static state problem, right? Constantly that you run into, which is where, from an industry perspective, like we kind of bang our head against the wall because it's like, okay, well, lock everything down for 6 months while we run the RMF, and it's like, but we have updates, so like we have real-time data coming in, and it's like, well, do a change request. Okay, but that's not how this works. I'm hopeful that the SWIFT process that's coming out of DOW will help solve some of this, but we're constantly seeing threats coming in from all over the place and trying to provide updates. And we have good partnerships with the government to like share data. But yeah, compliance is obviously not the end goal. It's a checkbox that we'd like to be able to do risk management better. Yes, absolutely. But that's not just done on a piece of paperwork.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to hit on the idea of compliance as a driver. It was the way that you could get your security dollars initially, right? Mm-hmm. So you could point to it and say, auditors are going to say this. We are not meeting this legal mandate, what have you, and that was the way to drive your dollars. Well, now that we're looking at this and saying we have to do this from a risk-based perspective, like a true risk-based perspective, not legacy RMF. Again, I love that term. What I'm looking at is I now have to show that I can integrate security fast and as part of a modern environment to get moving forward. I don't have the time for static problems, right? And I guess I'll be the one to break the seal on the AI thing. So sorry, guys. But somebody already kind of hit it a little bit, Dan, with the talking about how fast adversarial attacks are increasing, and there was echoed over here. by my colleague. So we've got new tools and new capabilities that are up in the ante consistently, and old compliance-based approaches will not suffice. So just like we're talking about a product-centric mindset to push things out the door, we have to have a product-centric mindset of integrating security to the point where just bring your workloads, we got you. That's it. That's the answer. Because then they have an environment that is resilient and reactive to threats, proactive against threats, which is the big term. We don't just need to be reactive. That's what static defenses do. And then that goes back again to the ground truth testing. So you see, I'm going to try to loop all my colleagues in. Is we need to ensure that these things are operating consistently and reliably and well. And so we need more than just some static testing or even some of the SAS and DAS tooling. We need actual adversarial attacks against this. Autonomous pen testing is great, but I always will tell you 100%, you need the creativity of a human hitting it too, because they will find the hole. Trust me. So
Let's keep going on the automation. We can't not talk about automation and AI, especially at this type of event. So can you all share a little bit about how you're using modern tools, or how folks here across government can leverage automation to continue to enhance data protection and resilience? Dave, or whoever wants to start?
Yeah, I can start a little bit.
Daniel?
We have a bunch of tools in our platform that all have various components within AI and that help us with some of that automation, but we don't rely solely on that. One of the things that's been interesting that helps us with our automation, our speed, is I like to talk a lot about the culture aspects of that, and really trying to have a true DevOps and agile, not in the buzzwordy way, agile approach to actually value stream management, breaking batch sizes down to the batch size of one, managing bottlenecks, choking off upstream effects, like all those types of core principles. And we actually apply that to RMF and our internal operations of the platform to help us do that, combined with those AI capabilities. There's one tool in particular that we recently enabled. Wiz in the environment to support, and we're in the process of enabling RegScale. Both have some AI tools around the security sets. And then, as I mentioned before, both AppGate and Akamai are part of our protecting our boundary and a bunch of AWS native tools. So pretty much most modern core technology stacks are offering some sort of capability that introduces automation. But that pipeline that we set up with automation that's not necessarily heavily dependent on AI is a really, really important process. I'll break it down just a little bit. So Justin, along with the kind of goal that you were setting of mission owner bring your workload, in our particular case, we do support both virtual machine and container-based workloads, but what's really good for our mission owners that come in is the DevSecOps pipeline that has that certification. So they bring the code. They compile it in our pipeline a pipeline that we set up for them with the end target environment set up in that pipeline. And through the build process, we apply the various RMF components like static code analysis, software bill of materials, secret scanning, etc. And through that process, you're getting a really deep look. And even when we're bringing a COTS solution into the environment, we are actually having the COTS provider bring their code and build, not their container, because we can see inside the container. We want to build that container. So that automated process, and the Marine Corps' AO and chief engineer have certified our pipeline that through that automated process and leveraging our underlying zero trust enabled landing zone, we meet all the RMF requirements to actually, in 15 minutes, if they pass those tests in the pipeline, go into production with a CATO at that container level. So that's where the automation that's coming through from an RMF perspective, but it's enabled. A big part of its enablement is zero trust in the underlying infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. How about at state, Daniel?
We use the tools that often come with the tools that we already have. So what we're seeing now is the automation of processes to speed up the whole response. I see a lot, mostly from the incident response world. So I'll focus on that just briefly, where you get incidents that happen, and then you need to make sure that they're trickling up to the incident responders to be able to handle what is going on. So we definitely are using it. We have to use it. I mean, at this point, the adversaries are using their own automation tools against us, and that right now I think we're in a place where the adversaries kind of have the advantage partially because they don't have to worry about regulatory frameworks. They don't have to worry about making sure they have the right paperwork. They just have to get the stuff out and then run it against us and see if they can get it to work. So and our response times require us to have humans in the loop, and they sometimes they can choose not to have humans in the loop and just get to the point where they get a shell, and then they can they're happy about continued further exploitation, maybe with a human, and then maybe more automation. So we're definitely in an environment where we're seeing where like the adversary is got a competitive advantage, and we have to raise the bar and use automation to give our defenders all the advantages they can get, and we really are steadily doing that in our environment. So it's really exciting to see the incidents, especially, as I said, I run a red team, right? So my guys are conducting activities against the network, and we're seeing we keep a special channel between us and the incident responders, so we know that if they see something, their first inclination potentially is that it's us based on some indicators, so that we actually can deconflict that and not have to let our colleagues in CISA and other organizations know that about what we're doing and bust all of our activities. So it's just and waste time and effort across the federal space. So it's very exciting to see that they're able to increase their detection rate. Not so exciting for my red teamers, but it's exciting for as a metric to see that we're seeing a better response because of those automations and that they're able to detect stuff. So,
Are there any areas or places you think automation could be better utilized or more strategically leveraged to support Zero Trust? Mike, do you want to take this one? Sorry, putting you on the spot.
Oh, okay. I mean, I wasn't expecting the AI question today. I was actually excited to not have to brush that topic off. Just every other day I talk about it.
You can pass the question.
No, it's okay. So from an automation standpoint, there's lots that could be done better. It's part of why I joined Akamai is the architectural difference. I spent 8.5 years at Amazon helping build the initial DoD book of business there and getting folks online and doing the initial BCAP connections and all of that fun stuff with the Department of Defense. All of it ended up being automated, but everything was very like manualized process. And as we were building it out, either in CLI or, for those who really like to mouse click through the console. And what we found was the government was slow to do blue-green testing. They were slow to do automated code deployments. It got better over time, and certainly with all the app factories that have been developed and all of the efforts. Where the biggest delta was, though, was the amount of hyperscale cloud environments that you were able to deploy into, because it was restricted based off of FedRAMP, ATOs, and the way that ITAR and all of that fun stuff operated. The exciting thing that I found about Akamai was the fact that everything was logical mesh deployment models, even though we could completely isolate network and environments and platforms. And so where I have this conversation a lot with our public sector customers is in the understanding that when a threat occurs, your speed of reaction is paramount, because you actually can stop a lot of downstream effects from happening if you can identify and complete your OODA loop faster than your adversary can take the next step in action. And because we're looking at this heuristic behavior globally, we identify and shut down bot activity near real time. We do protective DNS for the Defense Industrial Base, as well as the DOW and other agencies. But we're doing this through a tiered logical mesh architecture where everything can get deployed within milliseconds globally and have resilience. So even if we lose an entire site, we're automatically routing and distributing content and capabilities through our other locations. So we have 100% uptime because no one ever actually identifies or feels the pain from an end user perspective. These are things that we're trying to bring into the AI and agentic space as well, with our ability and partnership with NVIDIA to do inference cloud. And it's things that we're bringing to our public sector customers, because that same capabilities is policy deployment in how it's rolled out across a framework and architecture. And we have, it doesn't just need to be on an Akamai platform. That same automation techniques and the way that it can be performed is something that we happily partner and teach our public sector friends how best to implement and leverage, because next to us, probably the only larger global distributed platforms that operate are within the DOW and Department of State and U.S. government. So we're always looking for ways to partner and explain, hey, this is how we do this, and it's all algorithmic. It's all evaluating environments and leveraging that logical mesh, and then how do you distribute that not just in cloud-based platforms, but into DDoS environments, into architectures where you have to force communications. How do you think about that from a SATCOM perspective, and building resiliency and redundancy? And honestly, that's what automation is about. It's speed, it's resiliency, it's redundancy.
Right. That's great. So Dave talked a little bit about this already, but I'm curious for the folks in the room, how do you really foster a culture of this adaptive security in the space, and with all the mission critical needs going on at the same time? Dave, do you want to answer first?
Yeah, I'll talk about how it happened in our organization. And honestly, I'll use your favorite term again. The legacy compliance approaches that our organization was experiencing, as an example, proved by doing. So it was almost a lot of like what I was doing almost was in stealth mode inside the organization. We're like, all right, we know we can do it. We're going to prove it. We're going to get the receipts, and we're going to come back and show the results. So this wasn't a top-down leadership directed effort. This was something that my team and I started driving towards. And then when we started to show successes, and then mission owners could see, oh, I could stay with the legacy approach for getting my workload into production with an authorization, or I could choose this other path. That's when we started to see success, and it started to kind of pile on itself. I liked, Justin, that you're bringing up the product-centric focus. I think that's another key thing. I'm going to diverge a little bit, but I'll circle back. I think there's 3 or 4 things at play when you hear both the Department of War and the president in general talking about, we got to move faster, we got to do things more like commercial. I think in the federal space we often think, oh well, we need emerging tech from industry. Well, how did industry get that emerging tech and be out front on that innovation loop? Well, there's a couple of factors at play. One, they have best practices like Agile and other things like that they do that helps them move faster, but it doesn't stop there. One of the things that I'm really advocating for, I'd like to start to see larger shifts and change, is inside the government, a failure of a program or capability doesn't always result in funding being diverted or moved in a different direction. So failure is often continually funded. And so I think that's something that doesn't happen in the private sector. If you don't get customers, your company doesn't exist, right? And so that's something that financial incentive piece is critical. So inside with the product-based team approach is many private sector or companies are doing that thing. They're using that product thing. Inside the government, we're typically more waterfall, siloed teams, etc. And in the compliance world, that looks a lot like everything's a silo. The engineers are working over here, QA is over here, not DevSecOps, obviously, right? And Zero Trust is over here, platform is over here, and we're all working. You can throw procurement in there, you can throw privacy in there, and there's all these gates that you're going through, as opposed to the product team. The product-centric culture is we have a mission outcome we're trying to achieve, and we're all working together to move through that from a product-based perspective, not from, well, I just work in procurement and my job is to process RFPs as they come in, right? So that's a very different look. So that's the culture piece, is going after both seeing and having those results, but then also being able to start showing people what it looks like to work in that. So we've had some success. I would say probably a third to a half now of a lot of our new capability is now starting to be around product team approaches.
Justin, anything else you'd offer just from
So, did you have something? I saw you lift your
Oh.
thing. Oh, no? Oh, it's
No.
Tom. Okay. All right. Sorry. I saw you over there. You had like this, the wand. So. Okay. Okay. Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
One of the things that I think to tease out from what you were saying is like a predictive risk posture, because that's the big thing, right? And what does that mean? So we treat the environment and the threats that we think are out there as dynamic, and so we're trying to sort of predict that. We're trying to be proactive, and we bring that to the table as part of the entire product-centric mindset. And so when we have that predictive risk posture, we realize that there's ebb and flow to this. There's up and down, and we can resource appropriately. But most importantly, we bring a foundational level of resilience and security that the product owners, the business owners, the folks that are bringing their workloads in can leverage right away. And then from there, we can scale up or scale down, but we're doing it integrated with them, right? There's no separation. We're all working, again, most of the thunder was stolen over here. We're all working together. No, you're good. But I'm glad to hear the themes, because it's good to hear the validation of approach generally, right? And what we're talking about here. We're seeing, an emergence of this culture that we can do security fast. We can do product delivery fast in the government. I like the idea of up select and down select. I don't think it is appropriate all the time, because there are things we get mandated to do by law or just mission function. It is important to remember that the government is not a business per se, and so cannot always operate as a business. So there are times where it's not appropriate. But where it is appropriate and where we can do that, we should, because the things that are successful should be, prioritized in terms of, getting it out the door and encouraging that type of thing. And I've always hated the idea of like fail fast, break things in terms of like just a philosophy, but I do think that we should be able to lean forward and try things and then quickly pivot if they don't work. And that is right in line with the up select, down select, and the diversion of resources. If it's not working, then we go to the next thing, right? We iterate and we respond to that iteration, but we're also looking ahead and being proactive. So we got to balance all these ideas out. I can tell you, the CISO's vision is proactive, cybersecurity within the zero trust framework. And everything that we do when we're asking for budget, when we're asking for resources, when we're advocating for, how we're going to help our customers, which is the entire organization, we're basing it on the zero trust framework and our pushes there, because we see that as helping to drive forward, modernize the business, not just security. It is not just a security thing. It is a cultural mindset. So
Great. We probably have time for one or two audience questions, or one from Tom.
Good. Anybody have any questions of our panel? Okay. I'm gonna hold the mic. Jason Miller's here. He gets, that's his deal. He taught me well.
You're going to hold the mic?
I'm gonna hold the mic for you, and I'm gonna give it to you. Just your name and affiliation and your question.
Yeah. Gene Mattingly, Zigabyte Corporation. Gentlemen, thank you for this morning. Quick question. Looking forward to hearing, like I'm sure a few others from Tyler Harding, about ICAM, and specifically question, maybe not your first and foremost thought, but since you're here, how's ICAM going for you? What are your greatest challenges in ICAM? Because we know that it's a factor across the board in zero trust. Just like your perspective overall. Thank you.
So unfortunately, Tyler was not able to join this morning, but hopefully we can grab him for another event soon. He had a last minute change. So I think we had one more gentleman. Or do you all feel like you can
I can share
jump
that
in on
we're
that?
right,
Okay,
in,
yeah.
right in the process of
Yeah,
implementing
the question wasn't for
Okta.
Tyler. You guys go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of implementing Okta
Great.
is our enterprise ICAM for our platform.
Great.
We'll probably deploy in the next 2 months. Well, we already partially deployed in things. So yes, agree. It's a core part of the service that we provide to mission owners. It's everything from the cloud native access point, the ICAM, the active threat management, continuous monitoring, the whole thing. And really see that that's a critical thing where you don't make the mission owner assemble all the various pieces and parts. And the authorization speed is so much slower if the mission owner is having to pull all those separate things together. So we see all of what we're providing as a service ICAM, of course, is a central piece or capability within that that we have to provide.
So, I mean, the ICAM function itself is central to the zero trust because we just talked about context and allowing things in context, and the way that at least one part of that, and the major part of it is that identity, right? So that identity is what then allows you to say, here are the things you're allowed to access and the things you should access and the context in which you're accessing from. All of that is pinned on that initial identity, right? So, yeah.
And I'll add from an adversary, it may just make my guy's life a whole lot harder. And I'll also add, as a user, it's been a dream, because I'm after having to have all these different logins and different ways that you authenticate into a system, and then just have it work. And that's part of the sale for zero trust is it's not just about security, it's also making sure that it's smooth and seamless to the users and making their lives better and easier for them to do their job.
So from industry to industry, because it's always interesting, right? Like nobody thinks of us when you think about ICAM, but we are the Army ICAM solution and building the tactical solution for them as well. But the part that gets really interesting is when I was talking earlier about like the CISA pillars. Identity is a pillar, right? But if we thought about it in a different way, like visualize in your head, and instead of pillars, it's actually an arch. The keystone of that arch is identity, because the attributes that get pulled through are how you're going to be able to do all of the other pieces within the authentication. So it's the crux. It holds all of it together, and it provides the capability that then drives zero trust. And in my case, least permissive, but you know what I'm saying.
Right. The next question goes to somebody that actually helped out on that CISA pillar thing. You want to stand up?
So my question is, zero trust is also assuming breach, right? So how do you guys take information that you have in a breach and apply it to each of your specific domains? You've got red teaming, we've got architecture, we've got operations, and we have an Akamai, which you provide big services for across many different products and components.
I mean, I'll start off because from my perspective, I have to assume breach, right? Because otherwise I don't have enough people and time to be able to give it a proper evaluation. The bad guys have dozens, hundreds of people that can be working on stuff, and they have lots of time and money to spend on it. Often I have, finite time and finite resources. So assuming the breach is just a natural part of our assumption. So we use the information that we've learned from our colleagues from different parts of that are available on our own internal networks, and then use that quickly to allow us to pivot around and better evaluate the network as an adversary would.
So we are logically isolating workloads and the management services through networking and everything else, and we have ability to black hole an application really quickly. And so we do assume that if an adversary gets into a particular application, we can isolate it from everything else. Or it's already isolated, but we can further sever it and treat it like that, put it in quarantine, and then address it.
So from the architecture and engineering perspective, I'll approach it from the proactive perspective, right? So we've already, if we've already assumed breach, and we can then trace this intelligence that we get, we can leverage it for a threat-informed defense, and that helps us with our architecture because that helps us with our threat modeling, and then how we architect our environment and implement that is directly affected by that. So utilizing the things we've seen in the past from that where we know we've been breached, it tells us information about the adversaries that we have. We leverage that threat model, like I said, and then the threat-informed defense itself is part of that zero trust push for us.
Yeah, so I mean, from an architecture standpoint of how we build our infrastructure and deploy our services, we assume immutability of that entire architecture and design. So we can vacate anything at any given time and are constantly tracking. In fact, the immutability is at a 5-minute point. So like every 5 minutes, the entire system gets refreshed. As we look beyond the architecture into how it's implemented from a design standpoint, this is why no knock against the pillars, but again, like we think about it in that arch framework because it's all interconnected. And so we have east-west, north-south micro-segmentation that is applied at a policy attribute level. We can do the federation across multiple IDPs to be able to consolidate the attributes into a centralized location that then applies those attributes to the policy and drills that down into the various components that make up an application design and architecture. And then on top of that, constant interrogation. So again, it's not a one and done. Every click, every request has to be interrogated. You have to validate. You have to look at that full range of criterion that is laid out within policy about how that user or device or agentic AI is accessing that system, and then appropriately apply the policy and level of permission to that entity.
Awesome.
We
Okay.
have one more. The last one. Some people said they have questions, but they don't want to ask them in public. You have one? Okay, sure. I'm holding the mic too.
Jean-Paul Bergeau, Federal CTO for Guidepoint Security. So you guys kind of got into a little discussion around compliance and the viewpoint of it, and then is it good? What is it used for? I'm of the same mindset. You know, there's governance, risk, and compliance, and I feel like compliance versus risk is kind of where you guys were discussing. So I'm curious to kind of maybe even have you guys fill that out a little bit. You know, how do we overcome the compliance is good, it sets a baseline, but how do we make sure that we go to the fullest extent of understanding our risk? How do we get that in our world where I feel like we don't?
So maybe I'll start with the problem that we're all talking about, which is sacrificing both mission and security outcomes on the altar of compliance is what's occurring right now. Sure. So we have to come back from that, but that doesn't mean abandoning compliance. That means that, because compliance is meant to ensure the balance of security and mission outcomes. So those things should work in harmony and not in disharmony. The problem is you get people who don't understand risk. I think that's the problem. And they don't understand security, trying to apply compliance. And so it becomes, this I learned from you, checklist culture. Isn't that what you said?
Actually, I'll even use.
Checklist.
One of my old bosses in congressional testimony was saying one time described it FISMA as a cult of the box checker. So
A cult of the box checker. So I'm going to try to adopt that a little bit better. I butchered it, but that's the idea, right? Like if you purely say, well, I'm going to take this list of RMF controls, AC1. What do I have to do with that? No. What's the operational context of your environment? How are you trying to get speed to mission? What is the actual risk of this if it is attacked or compromised? Those type of approaches that will lead to those good compliance outcomes. So I'm not dismissing compliance. I'm saying it's out of balance and it should be in harmony.
Well, I think the G in there was kind of silent, right? We talked about risk, we talked about compliance, but the governance, you actually touched on it a little bit before when you said, you know, how do we mimic industry, its best practices? Well, that's part of your governance is how you're approaching, you know, these problems and how you're overseeing them. And it takes into account the risk and the compliance measures you have to have. And you should be able to, you know, utilize governance to sort of bucketize all that, understand your risk, and oversee it and facilitate those best practices, those best approaches, balancing out those others. So the governance piece is the thing that's, I think, least understood, least utilized correctly. And most people don't understand that they're actually talking about governance when they say best practices or how we approach these things in a systematic manner. That's governance. You're applying a process to it to ensure best outcomes and based on the evidence that you have, which is your risk and then your mandates from compliance. So yeah, governance is a key factor of it. It is not talked about enough, in my opinion. And in that dirty AI word that we didn't want to really talk about too much, it is, I think, the thing that's missing the most right now as we approach this, because to me, the governance is the way that we balance all of these things, whether automation, AI, the speed of delivery is how we're doing that. The best practices and approach are that piece, right? Now.
It's great. I think that's a great way to wrap up. A lot of common themes, a lot of head nods. So appreciate you all and appreciate the panel for making my job easy. Great conversation. And I'll pass it back to Tom.
Yeah, great panel. Great panel. And Dave, Yeah, good panel. Got me thinking there. I think it threw us off time, but that's okay. Time is just a concept. My next thing is a fireside chat. Now we don't have a fireplace behind us. We need to work on that. The video team needs to work on that. But anyway, I'd like to welcome to the stage Usman Chowdhury, who's a strategic growth executive at Google Public Sector, and we're going to be talking SOCs. Folks, if we could continue the conversation in the hall, no problem there. Anyway.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Welcome. And just to set things, everybody thinks of Google as this big AI company, right? You've got involved with AI, you're the Google search, but you've made a lot of strategic investments in cybersecurity, the Mandiant buy, now recently Wiz, right? We hear a lot about generative AI summarizing alerts and helping write queries, but you're looking at the concept of agentic security in the SOC. What does that mean, and how will it change the day-to-day operations of a SOC? Because I kind of think of SOCs, it's static. You know, you got a worldview, you've got lots of lights flashing on. How is this really going to change, especially with the pace of change of the threats?
That's my favorite topic, right? So, what is happening today, if we first understand the environment, right? Like, it takes 5 minutes to create a sophisticated polymorphic phishing campaign. It has become extremely easy using AI, and anyone can do it now. And so the velocity has gone up like crazy. And what we used to do is we would like throw like bodies at the problem. There are 5 million open roles in cybersecurity. So you don't have enough people to actually throw bodies at it. So as a consequence, like you have to fight AI with AI. Hence like the agentic SOC and everything. I will go a little bit into the background of, because there's more to just saying there's an agentic SOC. You have to build up to it. Our journey, you might have heard names like Chronicle and Google SecOps. Our journey started because Google itself got hacked in 2011 by a nation state actor. It's on YouTube. I would suggest you guys go watch it. It's called Project Aurora. It's like small videos, very easy to consume. But basically at that time, we had the same SOC tooling as most of the government sector has now. And it didn't work for us. We couldn't even kind of create a view of what happened to us. It took weeks because of even then our scale was enormous. So then a mantra was adopted that detect everything and trust nothing. Trust nothing was the zero trust part. We'll talk about it, but detect everything is how we kind of rethought how SOC should be. So we think of it in 3 pillars. The first one is you need to have a very strong data foundation. You need to have the data and you need to have the data available. So that's why everything is in SaaS fashion for us in Google SecOps, we call it. So we detect everything, we have it, and then it has to be available. What does that mean? It means that it has to be available in split seconds so that you are able to do good stuff out of it. It has to be hot. On top of that, then we add our threat intel so that it's more useful. So it's normalized and it's enriched. So that's one part. Over time, then we added the AI part. So again, AI, we think of it as a journey. You have manual, which is right now most of the government. Again, it's not working. It needs to be optimized. Then it goes to assisted, like how we did. Then it's semi-autonomous and autonomous, which is the agentic SOC vision. So when we went to the assistive part, what we did is that we thought, okay, how can we make the life of an analyst easier? And we started developing those specific features according to that. So it was like, how can we help you triage faster? How can we help you investigate? How can we help you remediate? How can we help create playbooks using AI so that the time is taken out of that? And again, that AI works because it's sitting on a data that is available to it. That graduated into the agentic SOC vision. Agentic SOC vision has these 3 pillars, right? You've got the alert pillar, which is what we just described, reactive, but it's now you can do it faster. You have the detection pillar, which is the proactive pillar, which is super critical because a lot of the time, because of resources or the firefighting mode, the proactive pillar is ignored. So that is your threat hunting, right? You see something, somebody was saying, like, if you get breached, how do you react? Well, if you get a breach signal, or you see something similar has happened in other ways, you need to do a threat hunt to figure out what you have exposed in your own environment. So agents can help you do that. Similarly, malware analysis. Similarly, detection engineering, so your rules are constantly updated, right? Agents can help do those things. And the third pillar is data pipeline management. Again, data is very expensive to store. So how do you bring in the stuff that is needed and not bring in or not ingest the stuff that is just taking up space? So all of these things work together. And that's the agentic SOC. We call it the vision, but like half of it is active and being used by customers today.
Yeah, so let's bring it to the government agencies, and you have to do a lot of blocking and tackling. Like you have to do a lot of blocking before this magical agentic AI is going to take over, right? But as government agencies rush to adopt AI to modernize their operations, new attack vectors are inevitably emerging. How should security leaders approach protecting these new AI deployments now? Now we're throwing in that in. People have AI right now; they're starting to use it. And you all have some good offerings. How do I defend against that in this kind of new threat?
So again, AI is the possibility, the productivity gains are enormous. Everyone is investing into it. But from what the research that we've seen, 3/4 of the AI experiment, 75% of the AI initiatives do not reach production, right? And the number one reason is security. So we need to think about security when we are thinking about these projects, when we are deploying these projects. Now there's layers to it, right? So you can deploy AI, just get TPUs and GPUs and build on top. You can do a platform as a service. You can do, and then build models. You can do SaaS and just build agents. But every single one of them, you have to think of it that you have to protect the data. You have to protect the model. You have to protect the APIs, applications, so the API calls. You have to protect the platform and infra. And of course, there's various tools and multitude of things that you need to do. You need to do a CNAP, you need to do DLP, you need to do multiple things. But how it ties back to the agentic SOC, you have to feed all of that telemetry back into your SecOps, your SOC platform, so that not only you're protecting them, but it's a loop, it's a continuous cycle, so that your SOC can keep seeing what's happening and identify if there's something that needs to be highlighted.
Yeah, and I think that's changed over the last few years. I remember the chief data officer and the precursor to the chief artificial intelligence officer, they barely ever talked to the CISO. But I think one of the things that CISA did over there that was wise is have a data pillar, right, and pull this together. How does Google work like that? Is it kind of fuse the people developing the products and the security people from the lessons learned, or how do you operate like that?
So we have this framework called SAFE. It's basically secure AI framework. So secure development is part of it. You cannot really put code into the production until it has built-in security, but that is one part of it. All the other, like there is secure deployment, is you have to have security in deployment as well, so that you're constantly able to vet those things. Because whether it's Google or it's and of course you've got a multitude of tools, right? The easiest place to actually breach are the seams, where basically two tools are talking to each other because the development teams changed. Even within a company, the development teams change. So those seams are the easiest one to crack. So you have to have, yes, secure development practices, but you also have to have secure deployment practices as well.
One use case I keep hearing about, we're off the script, by the way. One of the use cases I see is on the threat intelligence side. I'm getting data from CISA. I have my platform that I'm using. Maybe it's you all. I'm getting data from the FBI or something. Like it's hard to gather those all together. Some of them are using the same data feeds. How do you dedupe that? How do you get a handle on that and prioritize the feeds that I'm getting? You know, like I got a feed that's like 3 or 4 days old. That's not as high a priority. How do you do that?
Yeah, that's my pet peeve. So Right now, when I talk to CISOs, what happens is that their SOC, you have like the SIM here, you've got a tip here, you've got the EDR solution here. There's this swivel chair happening, and that is so non-productive. So that's why I was saying, like, when you're thinking, you have to think of it from the same angle when you're thinking of as a database, right? You have data, it's available, and then it has to be enriched so that that threat intel information is being enriched as your data is being ingested, so that if there's a case that is being created, it has that threat intel information in it. The second piece is, I think where you were going, is that, for example, for our case, Mandiant does like 1,200 incident responses a year. So if they see an important IOC that is pushed across the system, so that it's highlighted, okay, this is something critical that happened. So you already know this is something critical. And then in the agentic future, a threat hunt would retroactively be started on that specific IOC to analyze if you are exposed to that. So the only way to stay on top of that is the fighting AI with AI.
Good stuff. The summit, one of the pillars of the summit is zero trust. It's a big job. I'm going to go to zero trust. I think some of the cybersecurity companies, it takes years. Even somebody like you all that can invest in that area. What's the most impactful place? Let's get back to SOC. How do you get started? How do you get yourself going down this road so I can have an AI-driven SOC? What would you suggest to agencies that are a little bit starting this journey?
So I think the second pillar that I mentioned, then one was detect everything, the other was trust nothing, right? So that's when we developed our secure enterprise browsing. We used to call it Beyond Corp Enterprise. Now we call it Chrome Enterprise Premium. We love to change names, but like the background of that is that we use the browser to provide context-aware access. The reason is because now 80 to 90% of your traffic goes through the browser. Browser is your new endpoint, right? Most of it is web app based. Most of it is SaaS. So using the browser, we provide context-aware access. So if tomorrow I'm in North Korea, I shouldn't have access. If I'm trying to go into CFO's files, I shouldn't have access. And you can control exfiltration through the browser. You can control shadow IT, AI, like you shouldn't be able to copy paste stuff in ChatGPT if you're supposed to use some other one. We can basically retire VDI if you're not using anymore. Those are expensive things. And so that's something that is quick bang for your buck and gets you the way there. And sorry,
Go ahead.
those logs have to be fed back into the SOC again, because they are now becoming as important as EDR logs.
Actually just learned this a couple days ago, like a log4j or some kind of exploit like that. That was probably the best way to shut it down, was through the browser, right?
If you had those logs, you would have detected them much faster. Yeah.
Anything else that we left on the cutting room floor before we close this out? Any other pearls of wisdom that you might have?
No, I think thank you for inviting me. This is amazing. By the way, the Chrome Enterprise Premium, we had DOT here. They are deploying it based on their new, as he was explaining this. AI, the promise is amazing, but we need to ensure that we actually are able to extract those productivity gains. And if we do not do what is needed for security, we won't be able to. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Usman, for the discussion. Round of applause for Usman. That was fantastic. We're going to take a little bit of a break. We'll get you back here, get some coffee. I think we still have some food back there. And we'll begin. We'll get you back here in a few minutes. All right. If everybody can get to their seats. Sorry we're running a little late. I'm just as bad as you all. Like too much, running into people you haven't seen in 20 years. It's fantastic, but we're going to get the program rolling here. If everybody get to their seats, we'll get going in a minute. Hey, pretty good. You guys quieted down quick, so we're not going to take the full minute. We've moved some things around, and I want to welcome Gina Cinta, who's Deputy CTO at Thales Trusted Technologies. And she has 7.5 minutes, no pressure, Gina, to dazzle us. And I think the topic is going to be what, top 5 best practices or something. So welcome, Gina. Round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wait, I'm going to use this. Whatever you want. I don't like, hello? Test? Oh, hey, I don't like to be behind a podium. Thank you for coming today. In 7.5 minutes, let's see if we can talk about the top 5 best practices for Zero Trust. There probably are more, but let's see what we got. Who is Thales Trusted Cyber Technologies? We are a trusted U.S. provider of cybersecurity solutions dedicated to the U.S. federal government. Thales is a great, big, huge global company, and they are French-owned, and we are separated by a CFIUS agreement from them. So they don't know who our customers are or what they purchase. But we do provide to our customers a variety of solutions for identity access management, encryption of data at rest and in motion, key management, and hardware security modules to help you meet your Zero Trust requirements. So I think it's important to look at where the guidance is coming from. And the latest guidance that I've seen, NSA in January came out with a Zero Trust implementation guideline primer. There's a couple of documents out today. There's a couple more that are coming. And the important aspect of it is that they didn't reinvent the wheel. They reference the NIST Zero Trust framework. They reference the Department of War Zero Trust strategy. They reference the CISA Maturity Model 2.0. So they're taking all of these guidances from different organizations and bringing them into one document to say, hey, here's how we recommend you doing your implementation of Zero Trust. The first couple of documents will get you to, first of all, discover where your systems are, prioritize them, and then to get you through phase 1 and phase 2 to achieve what the Department of War is calling target level ZT. And then phases 3 and 4, which aren't out yet, and they said may be coming out, so don't even know if that's going to happen, will help you to achieve advanced level ZT. So good guidance. It's about 150 pages in 2 different documents. So if you need something to help you go to sleep at night, I've been sifting my way through it. Okay, so the top 5 best practices are tip 1, focus on the data. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. We heard the gentleman this morning talking about that as well. Access your current capabilities. Assess what you have within your environment and see what you can leverage today. Maybe you need to, upgrade it or expand its capabilities. Maybe you're not leveraging all the things that it can do. Secure everything from source everything from a secure supply chain. And that's where we were talking this morning about the software bill of materials is a very important aspect of that. Leverage your vendor experience. We've been in this business for over 40 years now. And so leverage the vendors in this room and across the industry to help you get there. And it's, mature over time. So first of all, the first tip, focusing on the data. I liked how Akamai talked about the arc rather than the pillars. But I really like this depiction of the puzzle pieces that's in the Department of War Zero Trust reference architecture, because all of those different components are really meant to help protect what's the most important, vital piece within your organization. That's the data. And so I really like the way this shows all of these are interworking connected pieces that are really focusing on how you go about protecting the data. Then from an access your current capabilities standpoint, where are you at with your identity access management today? I heard them talking about ICAM this morning. Maybe some of your systems are only leveraging passwords in MFA, or maybe MFA with passwords, and those will get you through like target ZT or traditional or initial categories under the CISA model. But how can you then be capable for tomorrow by leveraging phishing-resistant MFA or even continuous validation and risk assessment? So take what you have today and implement and improve on it to be able to achieve those advanced capabilities. From the standpoint of protecting the data, how are you going to do that? You want to leverage data encryption in order to protect the data so that you can then verify who has access, what type of access they have to that encrypted data. Because that's what everybody's trying to get to, our adversary is trying to get to our data. If it's encrypted and they don't have access, then they're not able to get to that sensitive information. So strong access control around that, being able to do data labeling and tagging, and then be able to leverage those user identities to control that access. Then the third tip is secure it from source it from a secure supply chain. So we've heard them talk this morning about software bill of materials. We've had to provide those with some of our products to some of our technology partners who are integrating our products into their solutions, but we've also had to provide those to our federal customers. So we've been doing that for the past couple of years now, and we have implemented a trusted import process where we take and look at any software that's coming in from our commercial source of Thales, and any third-party products or any open source code, and we validate and make sure that it's safe to be able to be implemented into our products so that we make sure that it's safe for our customers. But you'll also start to be hearing more about hardware bill of materials, like what components make up this piece of hardware and are those components secure, as well as cryptographic bill of materials. So what is the crypto that's being used, and is it secure? And then also from the standpoint, if you start talking about post-quantum cryptography, what algorithms am I going to have to upgrade in order to migrate to a post-quantum safe world? This is an example of the process that we go through for sourcing that secure supply chain, where you have to, assess your technology, do your due diligence, do a code analysis, secure the design review, and then also a risk assessment, and be able to control what's available to the customer and make sure that it's secure. Tip number 4, leverage your vendor expertise. The vendors within this room, vendors like Thales, like other businesses in the market that do data protection solutions or help you with zero trust. There is no one vendor on the market today that can bring you an end-to-end solution for zero trust out of their own portfolio. Now there was a call from the Department of War, DoD CIO's office for zero trust, asking industry to work together to create an end-to-end zero trust solution. Well, Dell did that, but that remains, it's a rip and replace type of solution. So how are you going to do that rip and replace, or why do you want to do that when you can take a look at what resources and what solutions you have in your marketplace today? And then how do you incorporate and leverage all of those and manage them cohesively across your environment, whether it's network applications or storage or database solutions or even cloud infrastructure. And what I really want to end with is the tip number 5, mature over time. Now this is through the CISA Zero Trust Maturity Model document, where it shows there's 4 different categories to get to the ultimate zero trust data protection solution. But really, if you look at what the Department of War uses, they have target level and they have advanced level. And DOW says you need to be at target level ZT by the end of FY 2027. That's not that far away. But if you think about it from a CISA model, it equates to advanced. We did a webinar last week, and I asked everybody on the webinar, do you use the CISA model, do you use the Department of War model, or do you use both? And interestingly enough, both was about 33%. Because there are agencies that have to meet both criteria because of the business that they do, not only on the civilian side, but also on the DoD side. A good example of that would be Coast Guard. Another example might be Department of Energy, where they do a lot of work, within the DoW and the Intel space. So think of it as a journey, but everybody's trying to get to that same point of being secure with their zero trust model. Mature over time, those 5 points of pieces: leverage your vendor expertise, mature over time, focus on the data, access current capabilities, and source from a secure supply chain. Question? Did I have enough time for a question?
I have questions.
Uh-oh.
I love what you said about vendor expertise, and as many of you know, on the 4th floor, we've got an integration lab that we just started, and it points to it's okay to talk to vendors to try to get the solutions. You know, there's a little challenge in the DoD right now. There's a new CIO. Randy Resnick and his team. They're kind of resetting. They're not allowed to speak right now while that's going. What do you think the biggest inhibitors to zero trust are right now? What are the biggest obstacles?
I think the biggest obstacle is the sheer volume of applications that you have to migrate. One of the other ones I've heard is about operational technology, because OT is not going to meet zero trust guidelines as they are today, but there is guideline that just came out for OT systems that actually was developed by industry, because they're the ones that develop the OT systems, right? So I think that's one of the bigger challenges, and also the edge, right? You're not you're operating in a smaller footprint when you're at the edge. Oftentimes you're disconnected, so you're not necessarily going to be able to, more than likely, never achieve advanced ZT. Might be able to, some systems get to target, but that could even be a challenge, right? Because of limited resources and a smaller footprint of technology.
Yeah, I think you're bringing a good point about OT. I mean, we've seen in Venezuela, what are you going to exploit? You're going to exploit like the OT. We do have Daryl Hagley from the U.S. Air Force heads our OT Zero Trust Working Group subgroup at ATARC, and we actually, in our integration center downstairs, we're doing a lot around OT, and we're trying to do some cool stuff. A lot of vendors in the room are working on that.
Another good example of industry working together, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, but I do a lot of work at the NIST, National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence in Rockville, Maryland. And they just did a huge zero trust project, which was referenced in the Department of War, the NSA document that just came out in January. They had a lab with all of industry collaborating to build that zero trust reference material. So you can go to the NIST NCCOE website to get really good reference material for zero trust as well.
Love it. We try to the only problem about that collaboration lab, we try to collaborate with them. We didn't get quite that worked out, but there's a lot of good efforts there. Thank you, Gina. This is fantastic. For a second there, I thought we were only going to get through 4 points, but she finished up right on time, so it all worked out.
The problem was the clock was over here.
Okay, well, that's a good excuse. You're good. We're all good. Thank you. That was really good. Next, we have, unfortunately, with the snow, and it just didn't work out. We have a Netscope. Steve Riley is going to speak to us. Unfortunately, he had to tape it, so we got a little quick tech talk. No follow-up questions for him since he couldn't make it. I think he's on a plane or something. So we'll show that, and then we get into our next panel with Nick. I see Nick over there. He looks like he's ready. He's about ready to sprint out.
Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Riley, Vice President of Field CTO at Netscope, and it's good to join the Cybersecurity Futures Summit. Today, I want to talk to you very briefly about one specific element in Zero Trust, and that's the notion of signals and context. What are signals and context? It simply gives you information that can help your policies that implement your Zero Trust strategy do a better job. So, for example, where do signals come from? They can come from who the person is, what device they're on, when they're interacting with something, time of day of week, you can see there. Where they're interacting with, because certain regulations require that people be in a certain country or that activities take place in a certain geolocation. And then finally, we even want to know something about why. What is it about the data or about the application that helps us learn a little bit more about why this person might want to be interacting with that data? Now, I want to give you an example before we sort of walk through all the different types. And it's this notion of device context. In the old days, all we knew about a device was its MAC address, burned in the network interface. But these things are no longer useful. They can be spoofed, and on mobile devices, there are always made up to accommodate privacy concerns. So how can we do a better job of identifying devices? Well, if we can see that it has an agent installed on it of some kind, or that it has a certificate or account, we can look at its specific network location or even its freshness. Now we know a lot more about the device, and policies can adapt themselves to whatever we see in these colorful boxes here. So I want to walk you through a handful of different types of context that you can use in policies to implement your zero trust strategy. First is the data. And in the data, we have a number of things that are important. We need to know where our data is. We need to classify it, high, medium, low, or something like that. We need to map to the ACI triad. Now, you've all heard this as the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, availability. I like availability, confidentiality, integrity, that order instead, because it reflects the order in which attackers have increased their sophistication. Indeed, I think attacks against integrity are some of the most difficult ones to detect and to thwart. Not everything supports a digital signature. We need to know how long the data should last. Yes, every bit of data you have should be destroyed at some point. There's no reason to persist things forever and ever. And of course, we need to know who the owners of that data might be. Only when we can discover all of this can then we build effective policies around the data. And we do this because we need to protect our organization's data and the people who use them. We need to inspect what people are doing with it. We need to govern the normal procedures that are allowed. And then we need to provide access controls that implement the governance. We also have an identity context. Now, when it comes to identities, we sort of think we know what we should be doing with them. We want to provision one, we want to manage it when it's alive, we want to govern what it's used for. We need to build reports and scores about what that identity has been doing over time. The retirement one, though, is sometimes organizations forget about this one. And just remember that when identities are no longer needed, don't delete them, at least first. Just sort of disable them until you know that they no longer need to be used in some other reason. Now, the reason why this matters is because we're trying to avoid breaches. And breaches always have, well, mostly always have some kind of identity associated with them, especially if it's an insider attack. And by managing access, by assessing the credentials, how fresh are they, how valid are they, what are the permissions applied to that, and then finally governing those as well. You'll see governance kind of as a theme in here. I gave you the example of a device earlier. Let's sort of maybe broaden that out a little bit and talk about managed devices in general. We want to score every device after we identify it and isolate it if necessary, so that the score can become part of a policy that implements your zero trust strategy. Now, that's for managed devices. On unmanaged devices, it can be a little more difficult. And I want to give you an example of how you can think about unmanaged devices in your policies. If the device is managed, someone can have full access to all types of content. If the device is unmanaged, then we want to look at another signal, and that other signal could be the label on the data. If the label is public, then people on unmanaged devices have full access. If the label is read-only, then people on unmanaged devices can be reduced to, if the label is private, people on unmanaged devices can be reduced to read-only access. In other words, because we don't know much about the device, we don't want to take anything from it. If the label is confidential, then no access at all. This policy then effectively states that to interact with confidential information, you must be on a managed device only. So this notion of being able to combine two signals together is what makes building zero trust strategy policies very powerful. And it's important that when you think about how to do this with different vendor products, ask them about signals and context and how those could go into policies. And if the vendor's like, I don't know what that means, then they probably aren't really thinking about what it means to have an effective zero trust tool or effective tool to help implement your policies. This is going to look similar to data. This is for applications. What applications do we have? What applications do we wish we had? Maybe not always the same. That same mapping to the ACI triad. We need to understand all of the interactions and transactions in both directions. We need to know what our external communications are. And then finally, as usual, we need to score them also. We have a network context that we need to think about. We have moved from one data center to many centers of data. Every cloud subscription is a center of data, which then we have to think about what do we do when we're either on the network or off the network? If you are off the network, then proxies and agents are very clearly the way to handle that traffic. If you are on the corporate network, then I want you to think about getting rid of this notion of trust zones. Look at like microsegmentation, what's called universal ZTNA that is emerging. The corp net is no safer than the internet these days. And having a better way of treating on network devices as if they were off network and going through proxies and agents even there is going to increase your security posture. Let's wrap up. Scores plus context help you establish a trust level in your policies. What component? Those are the ones we just looked at. What is the context? These are examples. They don't have to be a one-to-one mapping. You can calculate the risk score from those things. Then you can determine which control to apply so that your adaptive policy reflects the trust level you need at the very moment someone needs to access information. Thank you very much.
We need to get Steve in person. That was a good presentation. When Ross Ford gets excited, we know it's a good presentation. Next, we have Nick Wakeman, and we're talking beyond the bid, cyber expectations in modern defense contracting. And while I think it's both sides of the table need to know this, our government colleagues and our industry colleagues. My colleague, Nick Wakeman, come on up. Woo!
One-person fan club.
Nick is a legend. Don't let him fool you. He's a humble man.
My own mind, I am. Is this on? Oh yeah, great. Well, hello everybody. It's almost I can still say good morning since it's 11:25. As Tom was saying, I'm Nick Wakeman. I'm the editor of Washington Technology, and so I'll be leading this discussion on how cybersecurity has become a defining factor in federal contracting. And once it was sort of like that, its own separate add-on. Now it's sort of table stakes. So we have two very knowledgeable speakers who will discuss these requirements, how they're evolving, how they're being communicated in RFPs, and what this means for innovation, competition, and small business. So directly to my left is Derek Davis, a senior fellow at the AI for Developing Countries Forum at the Center for Research in Emergent Manufacturing at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And at the end is Terry Kalfka, director of the DoD Cyber Crime Center at the Department of War. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. I thought we'd just kind of start off with each of you just sort of talking a little bit about your organization, what you do, what your goals are, that kind of thing. So, Derek?
Is this thing on?
Yeah, there you
go. Previously, I worked in acquisition and sustainment out of the Office of Small Business Programs and the Pentagon. And my role was to create a strategy for securing the supply chain and thinking about the impact that has on the warfighter, but also how that affects small businesses and looking at third-party risk. And during my time in that role, I worked alongside Terry. You can go ahead, TK.
Thank you, sir. Yes. I'm Terry Kalka. I work within the Department of Defense Cyber Crime Center. We have not changed the name to Department of War Cyber Crime Center. We're working on it. We are within the Department of War. DC3, the DoD Cyber Crime Center, is a very complex support element across a wide variety of cybersecurity efforts in the department. I have the privilege of being the director of one of those elements, the DoD Defense Industrial Base collaborative information sharing environment, which we condense down to DICE. So I am the DICE director. For a little over 18 years, DICE has been the focal point for a voluntary public-private collaboration with the Defense Industrial Base known as the DIB Cybersecurity Program, where we are sharing indicators of compromise and other critical threat data with a partnership of about 1,300 defense contractors, and providing some cybersecurity capabilities to do early warnings and alerts, stop threats and attacks before they happen, or stop exfiltration while it's happening. That program, by the way, as many things in the department were put in kind of a state of pause, a strategic pause last year. This week we have reopened the DIB cybersecurity program for membership. So if you are a DIB contractor, or your company is, and you are storing or processing controlled unclassified information, you are welcome to join us. We've got info on our LinkedIn page. We've got it at dc3.mil, and look forward to working with you. The other thing we do is slightly less voluntary, well, very much less voluntary. I don't know how many of you have a favorite DFARS clause, but if that always gets a laugh. If you're in the DIB, you might be familiar with DFARS 252.204-7012. One of the requirements is the mandatory reporting of a cyber incident. Those reports come to my team, and we have triage, analysis, coordination with other federal organizations to develop mitigation recommendations and warn other companies of potential attack, B, look for other victims, and then C, use that information to inform senior leaders in the department when there has been a risk to critical programs and technologies. So, sum that up, we operate a voluntary threat information sharing partnership with the DIB, and then we are the focal point and analytic powerhouse behind mandatory cyber incident reporting.
So Terry, I want to kind of stick, since the voluntary program is just being relaunched.
Yes.
Talk a little bit more about that. What does it, why would I volunteer? What are you guys looking for? What am I volunteering to you?
Sure. So let me give a quick history of the program. Around about 2007 to early 2008, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Gordon England, brought together leaders from industry and leaders from the government. And I wasn't there at the time, but I'm told what he said effectively was, I will not buy another tank, ship, jet, satellite until you all stop the bleeding. And so we did, and that's the end of our talk. What came out of that was a voluntary information sharing partnership with 16 defense contractors whose names we all know. And I've talked to some of the folks who were there in those days, and it took some time to build trust. But fundamentally, what we're looking for from DIB companies in this voluntary program is cyber threat and cybersecurity information, whether it's suspected attacks or suspicious activity. Or, for example, we had a company reach out last year because they believed they had found a 0-day in a commercial product. They were right. And we ended up working with a couple of companies through CISA at DHS and with the vendor to help them identify and close out the 0-day. And that eventually got put into the known exploited vulnerabilities catalog. So what the compelling reason to participate in this is that we have built a culture of trust, because anything a company shares with us is kept anonymized. So Derek Davis Incorporated could join our program, say, hey, I got this weird activity on my firewall. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's malicious or not. We will take that. If we determine it's malicious, we will share the technical indicators with other partners in our program, and we'll share them with the government, and we will never tell them it came from Derek Davis Inc., except I just did right here. So the anonymity is really key to how we have built trust. And the fact that we take the data we get provided and turn back substantive, actionable intelligence for defense has been very powerful. And that's how this program that began with 16 companies hit about 1,300 about this time last year. And we look forward to continuing to grow the partnership.
Yeah, that's huge. That's a large number. So Derek, why don't you give us your perspective on sort of how the cyber requirements in the DIB have changed, and where are the trends now as far as that goes?
Okay. So while I was in the department, I oversaw Project Spectrum, Secure Cloud, Links, and a couple other programs that were focused on enabling small businesses to do business with the Department of Defense securely. And that was providing this training and education, but also creating pathways for small businesses with great ideas to encourage them to want to do business with us, which, as you may know, during COVID or right before COVID, participation in the DIB was really low. And so what we did was we created these programs in order to reach out to you folks in this audience and to give you guys insight and assistance. And so my perspective over the past 4 years or so, the speed to getting product to market and commercializing some of these products that are out there that you guys are thinking about the warfighter on, we prioritize those things. So if you know now, the HEGSETH has 6 critical areas that we find that are important to our homeland and to the warfighter, and to make us competitive and protect the United States' best interest. We are, at the time when I was in the department, and I just finished probably 30 days ago. It's not even 30 days ago. We looked out for those technologies and those services, and those programs that we had in my office at the time. We were looking to those and enable those companies to be able to do business with us. So we looked at cyber as a procurement gate. So if you had the product, we wanted to help you secure that, and ensuring that your third party down the line was secure. Your whole, would you say, the whole supply chain? I mean, the goal was to secure that, which obviously it's a never-ending story there in terms of how to do that. But that was a couple of the things that I worked on while in my office.
Okay. So Terry, kind of your perspective, what's the trend line as far as the cyber threats that the DIB is facing?
The first thing I want to illustrate or emphasize about the cyber threat is in my business and in the cyber industry, there's a phrase called assume breach. Assume the adversary is already in your network. There is no end of public commentary and publicly available information about how true that is. But I still encounter people frequently who aren't thinking that way when they think about their network design and their defense. So I was speaking to someone just this week who was telling me about how this system connects to that system, but that system doesn't have this, and then it's air gapped to that. But I said, well, what if they're already in there? Now what do you do? How do you limit access? Which, frankly, is why I think the zero trust discussion we're having today is so incredibly important, because you have to plan for the fact that they're already there, and you have to keep them out at the same time. So that's a real challenge. In terms of specific threats, I think there's plenty of information out there about the typhoons. PRC, North Korea, Russia, Iran are still kind of the primary nation-state actors. But one of the things we've seen evolve over the years, and is still really a huge threat, is ransomware, not just from the fact that they steal your data, not just from the fact that you either have to pay them or have backups or pay your insurance, but from the fact that that has the ability to halt operations. So a lot of the cybersecurity related to industry, a lot of the talk coming out of the department historically has been focused on information systems, right? Where's the data? And that's incredibly important. But we also need to look forward to how are we transporting service members and equipment and supplies? How are we getting to where the fight is? What is the operational technology that enables it, and what are the threats there? So that I would describe as kind of the leading edge of what we're doing in cybersecurity.
Derek, anything to add to that perspective? Or?
Yeah, I mean, what I found, because we got companies that had great technologies, but to TK's point, a lot of them didn't even know that they had either been breached or were vulnerable to attacks. I mean, some of them were so focused on getting product to market that their cybersecurity house wasn't in order. And so what we found was we had these awesome technologies, these awesome people, and it was still kind of like the wild, wild west out there in terms of, right, your technology is great, but you're putting the United States at jeopardy. And how do we prevent that? And that's alluding to what TK was talking about.
Now, where does CMMC fit into this? How will that...
So that's a perfect question considering we're talking about beyond the bid. So let me take you back to my favorite DFARS clause. Once again, 252.204-7012. And no, I'm not an attorney. So when I came to DC3 and started working in this area about 8 years ago, and we were really focused on the reporting requirement in that clause. We weren't at the time, I wasn't at the time, looking at the rest of the clause, which says, hey, contractor, you're supposed to defend your sensitive, unclassified information that the department gives you. You're supposed to protect that, and here's a set of requirements from NIST that tell you how to do that. What the department did at the time that we learned was not a great way to go was we said, well, you company, you tell us if you have met those requirements. Self-attestation, right? You tell us, yea, verily, I did these things. And we learned very painfully that most companies did not do those things, or they thought they did but didn't, or they didn't even know they had a requirement because no one was checking. So the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC, was developed over the last, 6, 7 years. Went through a number of evolutions and became, if you like, the law effective November of last year. And it's a phased approach. You can look at the DOW CIO website for the complete rollout of how it's going to go. But fundamentally, what CMMC for me is it is a third party validating that you're actually meeting the requirements that we lay out in the contract. So what are those requirements? They're aligned to a document called NIST 800-171, which is about protecting information on non-federal information systems. And CMMC is a way of assuring that data is actually being protected per those requirements. I will also add that the requirements within CMMC, if you meet them, you are compliant. Compliant is not the only aspect of security. And so some of the threats that we're facing, we need to really make sure that we treat that CMMC requirement as a starting point, not, I made it, I'm secure now.
Now, Derek, I know you worked, I think you mentioned Project Spectrum. So talk a little bit about what you guys were doing there, and one complaint I've heard about CMMC and these is that it's going to be a barrier, it's going to be a burden on small business and a barrier to entry. So how did you guys try to address that?
Yep, so Project Spectrum is a free training and education program for cybersecurity for small businesses. It's at projectspectrum.io. Still active. It still encourages small businesses to go to the website, register free of charge. The whole process is free. There's videos on the website about NIST, DFARS, you name it, Zero Trust. Even we're starting to add things in reference to AI and governance around that as well. But to your point, the biggest issue was the barrier to entry and the cost. And so how do you tell the DIB that they have to be compliant, but these companies just don't have the cycles or the funding to hire cybersecurity experts like some of you are in this room to help essentially help enable cybersecurity controls in your company and protect your products and services that you're selling. And so we had to figure out a platform and a program to do that, as well as secure cloud. And so with Project Spectrum, you can just go on the website, you start getting this training and education. There's a SPURS score, which I'm sure you'll touch on later a little bit, maybe not. But you can go through your level 1 portion of CMMC, and then there's guidance on how to get to level 2 and some other certification principles there. And then we also had cyber advisors that you would reach out to us, we would align you or assign you a cyber advisor, and this was a SME or a subject matter expert in cyber that can help you and your organization get you to where you need to be. Now, may you need to purchase a product or service in order to get your organization secure? Possibly. Or maybe you can just go in the cloud, one of the hyperscalers like Azure, GCP, or AWS, and maybe you're managing your whole environment in the cloud and they can help you enable security on that. But then after we start going through that process, we went and started building out Secure Cloud, where it was literally a cloud security platform that allowed you guys to communicate with us securely. So we would cut out the risk of, I would say cut out, but lessen the risk of you being, mitigate the risk from a breach perspective. So.
Can I add a comment? Oh, yes, please.
Sure. Right. So I'm definitely not going to have a solution here for the cost of things. I want to acknowledge that, yeah, it is cost. It is, and there have been communications from above my pay grade about that fact. I guess I would just say out to the world, like if not CMMC, then what? Given that we know voluntary attestation of compliance does not work. It doesn't, right? So what is the solution and how low or high do we set the bar for an industry of 250,000 companies, from the very largest, whose names we all know, to the very smallest? And like I said, I don't have the answer to that one, but that's the challenge of dealing with cybersecurity in this space.
Yeah. So, Terry, I also, and it sounds like both of you guys, like CMMC is really just sort of the start, if I understood what you were saying, that get there and then, so what's beyond that? I
Well,
guess?
if we look at the threat, it can't be the end, right? Again, how much do we regulate and how much do we leave voluntary? I'll simply say that the most advanced adversaries in cyberspace target the defense industrial base. And there are members of the industrial base who are victim to far less advanced adversaries. So when we think about the speed at which the threat is evolving, there's plenty of documentation about how AI is a shot in the arm for both offense and defense in cyber. I think we need to be willing to take risk in terms of doing things that go above and beyond what is simply the regulatory requirement.
So, what do you feel, and this is for both of you guys, what are some of the, common misconceptions around CMMC? What isn't it? What should it be?
It's definitely not a destination where things are done once you get it. Like TK said, it's evolving. You mentioned AI. If you guys know that CMMC wasn't developed and created with AI in mind, and it was just finalized in November. So now there's another level of, oh no, what do we do here? And so, I think that security is one of those things, like maintenance on your home. As soon as you think you fix something in your house, something else breaks. I think cybersecurity is pretty similar to that.
What are you doing in my house? I think the main misconception is that it is an entirely new requirement, and the security requirements have been around for a very long time. What is new is guidance on scoping and the process for validating compliance. That's what's new. The fact that you should have been, the defense industry, we're supposed to be protecting information at these standards. That's existed for many, many, many years. And I'm not trying to dismiss the burden of meeting those requirements, but the requirements themselves are nothing new. And from a cybersecurity perspective, they're relatively uncomplicated.
Oh, that's interesting. You know, one
We can make it worse.
and you probably will. No. You know, one thing I think is interesting about CMMC is also that as we move forward, if you want to stay in the DIB, you've got to do it. I mean, that's...
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, in many cases, it already is a requirement to prior to award, you have to be there.
Yeah.
So, A, that's a challenge, but B, my understanding is that the number of certified organizations has already doubled the department's expectations. In fact, I believe, you'll have to check me on this, but I believe it was announced yesterday that there are over 1,000 certified companies for CMMC Level 2, which I think we thought we'd get to like 500 in the first year. So if we're at 1,000 and the program's only been really live for a few months, that's very encouraging.
Yeah, we've been trying to follow the number of the third-party assessors, and that's sort of, if there's a bottleneck, it's going to be not having enough of those folks.
For sure. And mind you that this is a competitive marketplace, so not having that credential attached to your company is just going to put you in last place in terms of competing. And so if it's your goal to provide and protect the warfighter and grow your business, you're not going to be able to do it without cybersecurity aligned in your organization. And nowadays you can't go and say, well, I didn't know, or I don't have the resources or anything like that. They're just not going to really respond to that anymore. And the procurement officers, as I mentioned before, they're the gate to all this. They're dialed into it. One thing is a lot of the procurement officers have been around for quite some time. They're not the most technology proficient people, but they're starting to understand the impact that cybersecurity has and the demands that the larger contractors, which we're not going to mention those names, will require for the small businesses to even do business with them. So if you have an awesome widget that you want to sell to us through one of the larger contractors, they're going to check to see if you have your house in order to do business with them, to enable you to do business with us. What, TK? Sorry.
I think I need to make one thing clear is, we're happy to answer questions about CMMC, but we are not the CMMC guys. I don't work for the CMMC program office. As someone deeply involved in defense industrial base cybersecurity, I absolutely have had to learn a lot about it and follow its evolution. But I do need to defer you to the DOW CIO for authoritative, definitive statements on the program.
So, moving away from CMMC, both of you guys mentioned AI. So, talk a little bit how is it disrupting? What's its threat? What's its potential?
You want to? Go for it.
Well, quickly, there was this AFRL response due or was out recently. And I think there was a record number of responses to that solicitation. And you wonder how that happened. Well, I think AI had a lot to do with that, right? And so the organization was overrun with interest. Now, is it possible that everyone that submitted something, quals and everything, that they actually had the capabilities to respond to that solicitation? I would imagine the answer is no. But just imagine getting overrun with, say, 200, 300, 400 responses to that. Kind of like when you post a job, everyone's qualified all of a sudden. And so we have to figure out how to navigate through that. And I don't know if there's an answer for that yet.
In terms of the job market, I think it's going to be AI-generated resumes applying to AI-generated HR processing systems that will make AI-generated offers to negotiate with the AI-generated employee, and it will hire an AI. And
So I can just stay home.
that's
More
like,
so than I do
yeah,
now.
telework is back, baby.
That would be a great conference too.
Here is my own approach to AI, particularly for the work we do in terms of cyber threat analysis. So one of the things that I'm very proud of within DICE is that for many years we have been CMMI certified, which is an investment and a process. But what it enables us to do is see ourselves in a way that some organizations do not. When I first got into IT, I was doing business process automation projects. And you'd sit down with the customer and you'd be like, okay, tell me your process for, fulfilling an order. And they'd be like, well, just put it on SharePoint. Let's figure out what we'll do with it. Like, no, tell us the process so that we can actually, fill your process, fulfill it on the IT system. And they let IT dictate the process in many cases. And I think AI, there's also a risk that we allow it to do that for us. In terms of feedback from industry, you can kind of tell which ones are generated by AI. More importantly, you can tell which ones the human never went back and proofread. So our approach, if we have an understood, documented process, let's figure out where the pain points are, where the choke points are, and thoughtfully apply AI to that part of the process. I would rather do that than throw the entire thing into the AI system and see what it tells me afterwards. I mean, that can be informative and that can be interesting, but it's a tool, right? It's a tool, and so what we need to do is learn how to use the tool. I heard someone yesterday say, and I'm just going to steal this flat out. They can yell at me later. For the next generation in the workforce, we're not teaching people to have jobs that'll be replaced by robots. We're teaching them to use the robots to do things that we are not able to do right now. And I think that's a pretty sound approach to AI.
I agree. So, when working with AI, are there ways to safeguard, so I put information into the AI, it comes back. How do we know if that's secure, or how do we know if that's secure?
I mean, I approach it like any other IT system, right? The pillars of IT: confidentiality, availability, integrity. So what are the bounds of that AI platform? Does it reach out? Does it do RAG? Does it engage other information environments? Oh, and by the way, who's got access to my queries? Are my queries being tied back to myself? Will people know what kinds of questions I'm asking? And those are the questions we need to be looking at seriously with AI vendors. Not just where's the data, but what are you doing with the human interaction with it? Are there ways to secure it? Of course there are. Are there risks? Of course there are risks. And, when I got started in cybersecurity, SQL injection was like the biggest attack vector. I'm sorry to see that it is still a big attack vector, but it was like the thing. Well, now we're looking at like language model injection. How do we poison the model so that it gives you bad data back? Or how do we build in, let me say, a backdoor or a vulnerability so that we can pull data out of it? At a high level, those are the same concerns. The technology evolves, the way we store and process data evolves, but the principles, the fundamentals really aren't all that different. So yes, you can, and please do secure your AI.
So, part of what, in listening to you guys talk, I started thinking about is not necessarily the technology or the process, but it's sort of the culture. And do you guys see, does our culture or the culture around cybersecurity and how we work with, whether it's IT or OT, what's the state of the culture and how does it need to change, I guess?
So I think you're alluding to the whole people, process, technology conversation, and I still think that we're an integral part in the success of all of this. So we're just behind on educating the masses on the pitfalls in assuming or taking on all this new awesome technology. But you're right, it's a culture thing. Some organizations, so I live in Silicon Valley. I go back and forth between here and Silicon Valley. And when I'm there, when I meet with the companies out there, it's pretty clear that they're passionate about technology. They're not passionate about cybersecurity because they look at it as a blocker unless they're a cybersecurity company. But then even still, their house may not be in order, right? But, you know, we have to just do a better job at it. And events like this help. But again, it's like spread the word, one hand washes the other, continuously communicate, and how to educate people, see what's out there. And I mean, that's ultimately, as technologists in this room, I think that's the value we provide to this. So I don't know what you think, TK.
Yeah, I think you said a lot of very useful and important things. I think I will double down on collaboration, right? So to go back to my initial point, sharing threat data, sharing solutions, sharing information in a trusted environment is very powerful. I think I'm feeling sort of optimistic and compassionate today. I think the culture is doing the best it can. With the rate of change, as many people will say, the rate of change is increasing, and that rate is increasing. And the challenge of keeping up, feeling like you're actually caught up with everything, can be overwhelming in a way. And I think culturally, we have to accept that no single one of us is going to have the answers to all these things, but we really have to be willing to trust and lean on each other. And so, you know, Derek and I were talking backstage, and he asked me about a thing that I had no idea about. I haven't followed that aspect of cloud development and cloud security. Why? Because I've had to follow these other things that I've been talking to you about for the last chunk of time. And that's incredibly valuable, right? The power of a network of people is in the connections between those people. It's not the individual people. It's the connections that make the difference.
And, you know, Terry, it made me think also that your organization in particular sort of leans on exactly what you're talking about. So do people like to report? Are they reluctant to report? Why, you know, what is sort of the feedback you get on reporting requirements?
So that can be complicated. I'll give you an ideal scenario, which really does happen. We become aware of a threat, some sort of malicious activity, and in one of our systems, we're looking at somebody's firewall logs, and we find evidence of exfiltration. And so we warn them. We start with an email, hey, look out, you may have this thing happening, please confirm. And in the case that they don't respond to the email, we call them pretty shortly after. In fact, I will tell you a true story that sometime last spring, we, through some of our systems, had identified a ransomware actor setting up at a research facility. And we knew this particular actor, what they would usually do is set up on a Friday, detonate their stuff over the weekend, and when you come in on Monday, it's the Mondayest Monday of your life, right? We're like, oh my gosh, this is really them. This is exactly what they're doing. Call them. And we did, and we send them the data, and they blocked and stopped the attack. And Monday came, and it was a Monday, but like there was no ransomware attack. That's when that virtuous circle of information sharing really pays off. And then our ability to share that data with both industry and DOW elements, and to get responses from them and additional information that they've learned, again, creates a cycle of information sharing that's incredibly powerful. Now, the flip side is, if you have to report a cyber incident, you're probably already not having a good day. So we try to make it as painless as possible. We are not contract enforcers. We are not here to beat you up for having a bad day. In fact, I can tell you honestly that the purpose for the incident reporting is not so we can then single out a company who actually did what they were supposed to do and reported the incident. We are trying to understand and respond to risk to the systems and programs that industry is developing for us. And if I'm the program manager for name your massive defense system, and I find out that critical information has just gone out the door to our pacing adversary, I need that information so that I can pivot and change my acquisition strategy. And that's the spirit in which we're trying to get this information.
Oh, great. I think we're out of time. So I want to thank you guys very much. This was great. I appreciate the conversation, and I'll turn it back over to Tom.
Thanks for having us.
Great panel, Nick. Nick, I got to ask you, old Nick, I think you secured the first public appearance for Kirsten Davies, who's the CIO. How did you do that one?
Yes. How
Tell
did
us
you?
about that event.
Well, I don't really know. We requested somebody else, and they came back and said, "Oh, I can't do it, but Kristen can." I'm like, "Okay." So it was just serendipity.
When's that event? I'm looking forward to that.
It is the last Friday in March, so March 27th, here, starting at around 8 o'clock. The WT Power Breakfast on CMMC. And
You're such a humble man. You should have just said you did it personally in your personal connection.
I sent her candy and flowers and all that.
Right.
No.
Well, good job. Okay, great
I'm
panel.
not that
Learned
charming.
a lot. I think we are going to, the Agentic AI group has to do like some kind of conference that'll take place in 30 milliseconds. We'll have to figure that one out. I saved the best for last. No, I'm going to hype you up a little bit there, Janelle. Janelle Osworth, Director of Public Sector at Federal at Delinea, has a few words for us before we break to lunch. Welcome.
Nothing like being between you and lunch, or more importantly, happy hour, right? In some cases. So, welcome. I would be remiss if I didn't first just say thank you to Carasoft and the groups for hosting these wonderful events for all of us. As industry and government, it's always great to get together and be able to talk amongst each other. So, thank you for that. My name, again, is Janelle Osworth. I'm responsible for the Federal Division of Delinea. Just out of curiosity, raise of hands. How many people know who Delinea is? All right. Did you just learn it today, or do you really know? So we are the identity company. What does that mean? Well, we ensure our customers' mission are secure at every interaction, and that's wildly important, particularly in the Fed space. Security starts with visibility. Because let's be honest, you can't really protect what you can't see, right? So most of our agencies struggle to understand where real risk lives across users, machines, environments. Delinea gives these agencies the ability to quantify their risk and prioritize them in a meaningful way. We analyze true risks exist at every interaction, which is huge. So this allows our agencies to be able to apply the right controls, the right access, and whatever you need to support your mission. The real key differentiator between Delinea and others out there is our three-pronged approach. When you think of Delinea, you should really think of we discover, we analyze, and we continuously protect. We quickly are able to simplify privileged from non-privileged accounts in Active Directory, in networks, and in cloud environments. That is we have a comprehensive solution that goes through the entire security landscape of our customers. It's a game changer in the industry for us. Delinea doesn't just secure identities, we secure the mission. So today, what I would ask you is, if you haven't already, please stop by and see my tremendous team in the back, learn more about our solutions, what we do, where we do it, and how we do it. And for now, please go enjoy lunch and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Just one little quick question before we break. So to quote Kobe Bryant, the job's not done on this. Where are we? What is the actual state of where do you think the federal government is on I'm good on identity?
I believe right now, as far as the actual state, they're not quite there yet. Zero trust. Everybody is in. I don't want to say a mad dash, but we're inquiring. Right? We're getting a lot of inquiry about how do we do this, and how do we do this successfully? How do we do this quickly, and with transparency.
Thank you for that. Janelle, one last round of applause for Janelle. Thank you. Okay, lunch is being served. Thank you, Janelle, for that, by the way, for the lunch, too. It's not the Oklahoma land rush. You don't have to go there, and we're not going to run out of food. We actually got a little close last time, and some of the staff was like couldn't eat right away, but we're good now. We've got good supply chain management going. Lots of good food there. Feel free to enjoy. We'll get you back here in under an hour here. Thank you. Good morning. All right, I think we're about ready to get going. We're gonna get you out of here by 2:30 or 2:45 or so. We've got a couple tech talks, and we got a monstrous panel coming on, and then Frank Cockle is gonna have a really interesting discussion with Dr. Bill Streiling. Definitely stay for that. He's always got something to say. He worked at the Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office as a CTO. But next we have Joshua Yu, who's Senior System Engineer at Veeam. And I recently did a roundtable with Veeam, and it was on resilience. So, you know, it doesn't do you much good to have great zero trust when the power goes down. You know, you can't really protect your enterprise. So resilience is something that everybody needs to be aware of. I think zero trust is like a subset of that. I actually don't have any idea what he's going to be talking about. But Joshua, is he around? There he is. Okay. Round of applause for Joshua. Yeah. Dazzle us.
Thank you. Can you hear me without the mic, or do I need to use the mic? I need a mic. Hello. All right. I just point it here. Yes, good afternoon. My name is Joshua Yu. Thank you, Delania, for the wonderful lunch and for having us here today. So in the next 15 minutes, yes, clap of, that's great food, right? So hopefully you won't fall asleep, right? But I will try not to. But let's continue here on the topic of data resilience. So what I'm going to talk about today is the Veeam's 5 pillars. I think earlier today in the morning, we heard a lot of great information, informative of zero trust, right? Data being one of them. So from a Veeam perspective, we started with the 5 pillars of data backup, data recovery, data portability, data freedom, data security, and data intelligence. Now, data freedom isn't on there, but I added to that because the data portability from a Veeam perspective gives you the flexibility with our technology is that if you use our solution to back up your data, if you wanted to change in the future from a different hypervisor, different cloud, or from virtual to physical, that data is yours to do with what you want to do. So we're not going to hold the data hostage. Now, working with a McKinsey Group, Microsoft, Splunk, Palo Alto, Veeam, we, I would say, extended the Veeam DRMM, the data resilience maturity model, to now enhance even more of the zero trust of the technology piece, the strategy, people, and process. So a little bit about the DRMM process is that we work with, like I said, the extended ecosystem, right, to talk to Fortune 100, state and local, right, public sector, different kind of customers from a C-level to gain an understanding of where they stood from a data resilience. Not just for backup, which is table stakes, but how do you ensure that you can recover, have a process, test your DR strategy, and automate, right? I know we heard a little bit about AI. I'm not going to talk anything about AI today, but there's a slide that mentions one AI, okay? But I'm not going to, there's not an AI thing, okay? But we talked to about, like I said, 150 customers with over, I think it was like 150 questions that these C-level teams got together and answered a question. And from the aggregate with, again, McKinsey Group leading that questionnaire research, is we came up with 4 horizons that a lot of respondents on where they stood from a current state of their quote unquote zero trust architecture in relation to data protection. At the bottom is the first basic, intermediate, advanced, and the best in class. Similar to climbing the tall building that whatever you want to climb to, right? Recently I was in Seoul, South Korea. They have the 6th tallest building in the world. It's like 584 meters. I don't know what that is in feet. I'm not a metrics guy, but it's the 6th tallest building, and you could walk up the entire stairs if you wanted to, but I just took the elevator. It took a minute. So here, we're going to help talk about the results that we got, and we share with our customers and partners on, hey, do your self-assessment and see where do you stand. 44% of the respondents were at the beginning horizon number 1. This is the basic rudimentary, hey, I got a backup done, but do I have a strategy for resilience, right? Is there a recovery plan? We do. How often do you test it? Have you tested it? It's a theory. So again, there's no accountability, or it's like, hey, we're good. I think there's no problem. 30% we found out were in the second horizon. They had an RTO target, immutability, retention, ransomware simulations. So if you add up the 44 and 30, if I did my math correctly, 74, right? So 74% of the respondents were in this tier 1 horizon and tier 2. 18% were in the mature and adaptive. They had a organization-wide resilience strategy. They have the 3-2-1-1-0. That is something that Veeam kind of extended from the industry 3-2-1 rule. Who knows what the 3-2-1 rule is? Uh-oh. All right. A little bit about 3-2-1-1-0. But 3-2-1 actually was invented by a photographer. They're like, what? Nothing to do with IT, but the photographer wanted to ensure that his customers had 3 copies of their photograph, and he had it on 2 different media and 1 offsite. So from a Veeam data protection, we want to ensure that we follow that 3-2-1 rule, and Veeam added that 1-0 at the end. If you Google this, there's a zip code in Florida that actually has a 3-2-1-1-0 rule. The extra 1 is going to be immutable, 0 being offsite. So again, 18% of the other coin of the spectrum were in a higher tier. Now the last group, the self-optimization, 8% of the 150 plus respondents had all the things that you see here. And this is going to encompass not just data backup, but again, the resilience, right? How do I ensure that from a framework of zero trust, RMF, SSP, DR, NIST 800, 500, right? Revision 3, 4, 5, taking all the compliances, all the requirements to ensuring that your data, I think that was a word that I heard a lot today, is the data that we want to protect, the data that we want to use, and the data that we want to ensure that our adversaries do not get, right? I think there's only 2 more slides. So cumulatively, there's 3. 74% are in the tier 1, tier 2. 26% are, I would say, in a good spot that they can get to the last horizon. So for our agencies, our customers, talking to the directors, our partners, our FSI integrator community as well, is that we are a component. We're not the silver bullet. And we work with, kind of skipped ahead here, but this is just what I said earlier. I forgot this one. Who here know what this is? No, it could be, but this is an actual ransomware message that one of our clients got. Okay? So if you see something like this saying, hey, your files are stolen from your network, encrypted, you contact us, right? They give you options. It's kind of like, hey, we're encrypting your stuff and ransomware, but I'm going to give you how to get it back. But there's a separate topic of, do you even trust someone who stole your money, right? To say, give me some Bitcoin, I give it back to you. But again, we want to prevent and systematically test, right? You've done your thing, protected the house. How do I ensure that I'm going to simulate Ethan Hunt coming into the front door and you don't know that he was there? So now we got to ensure that, how do we detect Ethan Hunt from coming again? What did he touch? And if those of you who don't know who Ethan Hunt is, maybe Jason Bourne, okay, or maybe John Wick. We want to prevent these sophisticated actors to be not able to come into your house. And I think earlier today we heard that we are, again, a component to the overall layer of data protection and security, right? So we work with our partners from the N to the firewall to like a Sophos, XDR, NDR, EDR, working with the storage, right? The Knox, the Splunks. So we're able to communicate the information that we detect to the edge and vice versa. The firewalls detect the signature, right? They can tell us, and we can enact action automatically. Hey, go ahead and run a backup to ensure that there's nothing that got through. And we can also ensure that we're, again, working together to ensure that we're protecting the data that supports the mission. Then that's it. Any questions? So please come see us at the booth. And
I have a question for you, and I wouldn't want to play you in poker. You acted like that was the first time you were going to see that slide deck today. You did a really good job. I appreciate that. To quote the great Allen Iverson, the question that I have for you is, Allen Iverson, practice. How do you see the agencies that do a good job with this and do, what's their practice routine?
okay, so I think I'm going to go with AI, Allen Iverson, but
Yes, Allen Iverson, what I say. Yeah.
So how are agencies doing today? So what we share with our partners, again, with the agencies, is that they are constrained sometimes with budget, people, process, but at the end of the day, it's how can I use your solution to meet the check boxes of requirements that's going to ensure that if the inspector general comes or an audit comes, how do I pass so that for A, I get funding for next year, or B, to show that I'm meeting these regulatory requirements from Congress or OMB or whoever, directive, right? So we have tools in place that allows the agency customers to automate certain works of the job of the backup. How about this? Most customers today, they do a thing. They do a backup. Hey, I did my thing. I'm done. Next day, something happened. The kitchen burned down. Hey, remember the cake that you baked last night? Can we get the cake out of the refrigerator? At the time when you do a restore, that's when you find an error. Oh, we used the wheat flour instead of the corn flour, right? So we have ways to automate, let's say, testing of the backup so that once you do the job of the critical 10 systems, Veeam will automatically ensure that we can restore, find any anomalies if you wanted to do so that we can do some scanning, AV, testing, whatever you want to do, and then put it back, document, email to the team as an example. Did that answer your question, sir?
It did. Round of applause. Great presentation. Our last tech talk is Lou Eichenbaum, and Lou, if you can make your way. I met Lou under his old boss. He was the Department of Interior. Remember, it was Sylvia Burns, and Sylvia was the CIO. And Sylvia asked me a question. Have you ever heard of Zero Trust before? and it was very similar to the first time I ever heard about the internet. I have no idea what that is, and I was standing right next to you, and that was like the first time I heard it was like 8 or 9 years ago or something. Was it 10 years ago? Now, it's matured a little bit, but welcome, Lou. I can't wait to hear your comments.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Tom. Excuse me. All right. Yeah, so I'm Lou Eichenbaum. I'm the federal CTO at Color Tokens. Like Tom said, I previously worked at the Department of Interior until September of last year, where at that time, I was the CISO. I also ran their Zero Trust program for several years, and I've effectively been working on Zero Trust for 10 years, as Tom knows, and I've known Tom now for 10 years. What are you going to do about that? So I am here today to actually introduce a new concept that we have come up with at Color Tokens, and it's the concept of active resilience. In our view, this is it's the next evolution of Zero Trust. And what is active resilience exactly? Everyone is now using the word resilience when you talk about what are we going to do to better ensure that our mission operations can continue in the event of a cyber attack, right? So effectively, what active resilience is, it's really the realization of all of your Zero Trust policies, strategies, capabilities working together to ensure that your mission essential functions can continue to operate in the event of a cyber attack. It's all the pillars of Zero Trust, not operating in silos, but integrated for the sole purpose of ensuring the mission continues. We've heard a lot of people talk today about, and it's really been good to hear these conversations. A lot of people have been talking about, well, Zero Trust, it's kind of become this compliance checklist. And in my view, after working on it for several years, Zero Trust is, to me, it's sort of become this thing that we need to implement, right? I need to implement Zero Trust. But really, what are the outcomes we're trying to achieve by implementing Zero Trust? And for us, that's why we came up with this idea of active resilience. What achieve, should I use a...
Yeah, just turn that off. Yeah, just use that.
This doesn't work. Okay, sorry about that. That's Tom's fault. So it's the idea of what are we trying to achieve? So to me, Zero Trust, and I know everyone's heard about Zero Trust 2.0 now too, which is more focused on the ideas. It's more focused on resilience. But in my view, Zero Trust was always all about resilience. I don't know why we need a Zero Trust 2.0. That's my opinion. I could be wrong. But to me, Zero Trust was always about resilience. It started with the concept. Again, it's been great to hear a lot of people use the term assume breach. That was the whole concept behind Zero Trust. Assume breach. It didn't say accept breach. It didn't say, stop protecting the perimeter. You still need to put all your efforts into protecting the perimeter, but you should need to put the same amount of effort into protecting the interior of your network by building in resilience, right? So how do you do that? That's the question. And over the years, I'm sure a lot of us have been working on Zero Trust in the federal government. We've made some progress. We've done some great things by implementing strong identity, EDR, SASE, but there's one key component that we've been missing. And again, to me, it's a foundational component of Zero Trust. That is microsegmentation. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is here at Color Tokens, we actually have a platform that delivers a software-based microsegmentation solution. It's called XShield. For years, going back to what Tom was saying, 10 years ago, I started my Zero Trust journey. Sylvia Burns told me, hey, we need to implement this. So we built our first strategy around Zero Trust. There were two things we focused on. Number one, strong identity. Number two, microsegmentation. At that time, microsegmentation, there was no software. So we tried to do it by basically rebuilding our hardware security stacks around all of our high-value assets. That was our strategy. It failed because it was too expensive, too complicated. Then software came out. And initially, the earlier versions, yes, cheaper, easier than the hardware, but still very complicated to implement because you had to work with multiple different organizations within your federal agencies, which, as we know, is very difficult to get a policy in place. So that's why at Color Tokens, what we decided to do is let's make microsegmentation actually achievable for people. Let's make it easy. And how do we do that? Number one is making sure that it integrates with every product you use. And I think, if you're a vendor in this sitting in here today, you know that if your current software product or package, if it doesn't integrate with everything out there, you're probably not going to be successful. So that was our first goal. Let's make sure we integrate with everything. And so to give you an example of what we do with our product, we integrate with all the major EDR solutions, CrowdStrike, Defender, SentinelOne, all your SIM tools, all your ITSM tools, your identity tools. And what we do is we are able to ingest that information, and based on that, and of course, leveraging AI, well, I'll talk a little bit more about our AI roadmap in a minute, but we all have to have AI in our products now, but leveraging that, we can automate the building of secure microsegments inside your environment. Now, why do I need a microsegmentation solution, you ask? Well, I mean, one of the main things is to prevent lateral movement, right? We still see the same attacks happening over and over again. A user clicks on a phishing attack, their endpoint's compromised. Now the adversary has a foothold in our network. So they now have the opportunity to scan the network, find a critical asset, move laterally. By building a secure microsegment environment inside your networks, it will prevent that from happening. So one of the reasons why we integrate with all these solutions is to build policy, but it's also for ease of use of implementation. So like I said, we integrate with all the major EDR solutions. So if let's say you're running CrowdStrike, you have a full deployment of CrowdStrike inside your environment. We can leverage your CrowdStrike agents and all your endpoints to deploy our solution. We don't have to employ our agent. We can leverage that. We can do a deployment within a couple hours. We can start collecting information. Within a couple weeks, you can have secure microsegments in place in your environment. The other thing that we're trying to do to make this easier for people is, of course, implementing AI. So as of today, in order to do that, we've implemented it's a ChatGPT feature, right? You can go in and you can say, hey, show me where I have a critical vulnerability in one of my high-value assets. It'll show you where that is. You can say, all right, does that map to any of the MITRE ATT&CK TTPs around lateral movement? It'll show you. And then you can say, all right, can you help me create a policy? It'll help you create a policy. That's phase one. Phase two, which is actually going to be available next month, is actually it totally automates that, where all this information that we collect within your environment, our agentic AI will actually build effective policies for you, and we'll send them to you to say, hey, we've noticed a critical, a critical vulnerability here where you could have a lateral movement issue with one of your high-value assets. It'll build the policy for you, allow you to review it, and then at that point you could take several steps. You could either implement it right there. Most people won't do that because you might fear you might break something. So we have what we call a progressive approach. It's a 4-phased approach. Initially, you can put it in monitor mode. It'll then look at the different paths between the applications that it needs to communicate with, and determine what is the best policy to ensure the protection of the system, as well as to ensure it continues to operate. And then you can slowly, progressively implement it over time so that you don't break anything. So that's effectively what we do in the microsegmentation space. So again, how does that play into this overall idea of active resilience? And I did want to say, is Jason Miller still out here? Is he here? There's Jason. Jason asked me I was telling him about this in the hallway, and he asked me a great question around the idea of active resilience. He was like, "Oh, is that like it's the opposite of passive resilience?" And it actually made me laugh. And but yes, Jason, you made me think, and you're right. That's exactly what we're trying to do here. It's because the other thing I've noticed as this word resilience keeps being used more and more around zero trust, people have different ideas of what resilience is, and there is a difference between active and passive resistance. In my view, active resistance is what we're doing. It's being proactive around building these microsegments inside your environments, building proactive measures so that in the event of an attack, you don't have to react. You've already built that resilience in. Passive resilience is kind of what we've done in the past, right? Passive resilience is, well, my system got compromised. I'm going to shut it down. It'll be offline for 2 weeks while we, get the backup tapes and rebuild it, right? So that's the difference, Jason. So thank you for asking me that. And then again, I think the last thing I do want to talk about is, I talked about integration. It's the fact that zero trust and the outcomes we're trying to achieve with active resilience it's a team sport. And that's why, I want to thank Tom and ATARC for allowing us to be part of the integration center. So we've recently installed our product here in the integration center. And I want to call out my good friends at ARMIS back there. Hey, Matthew. So, sorry about that. So we have implemented our products in a lab downstairs with ARMIS. This is a Zero Trust OT lab where we are demonstrating how working with ARMIS has the ability to go out and detect all OT assets, all the information around them, all the vulnerability and security information around them. They then are able to ingest that information into our solution, which will allow you to create secure microsegments for your OT environments. This is very important. Again, critical infrastructure has become a major, concern that has been. It's not something that people have been thinking about, but now it's become a focus. So we're trying to build real good security around our critical infrastructure. And with that, I think Tom is getting ready to wave me off. So I want to thank you all for your time today and enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you, Lou. And a little bit about the lab. It's actually downstairs. We partner with our friends at Carasoft, and it's for like agencies like DISA. Hey, I just want to do some market research. I have an environment. It's an 8-month waiting list to get in there. So we've seen also from the vendors, I need to partner with companies I haven't partnered with before. Just tell us a little bit how you're using a little bit more on, I know you got some demos coming up. You got some.
So, initially, we're already using it to demonstrate to our customers like this. And Matthew and I, we literally just finished our implementation, a week ago? But this week we've probably done 5 demos to customers just to show them what we've done already. And so for us, this is just the start. I'll open this up to anyone who wants to work with us. If you're part of the, if you're an ATARC member here, if you're interested in helping us figure out how to solve problems within the lab, let us know. We'll work with you. We're looking for an identity provider next, I think, right, Matthew? We have some other things that we want to implement in the lab. We have specific use cases that we've created so that we can show the the efficacy of what we're doing. It's not it's just not a lot of nice blinky lights. It's we're trying to solve real problems here.
Love it. Thank you. And we have Lindsay Wilson. If Lindsay can stand up, she's way in the back. She is our membership director. If you want to know more about the Integration Center and everything else, yes, Lindsay, we've worked together a long time. She does deserve a round of applause. But I'm going to give one for Lou. Thank you, Lou. And Lindsay, I guess. There you go. All right. We got a Power Pack panel. It's so good. It's building and measuring success in the public sector security. It's so good. I'm a little jealous of my colleague, Iris Constant, editor and social lead for branded content at GovExec. Iris, if you want to bring your panel up.
I would love to. So, welcome everyone. I hope you're having a lovely day so far. Hope lunch was good. If it was bad, do not tell me. So, as we all know, today is Thursday, and I want to open with a throwback Thursday here. So, we all know Memorandum 2209 really set the stage for federal agencies and gave them an initiative, a directive, so to say. Implement Zero Trust. In this session, we'll be speaking with public and private sector leaders about how they're working through identity credential access management and kind of balancing legacy systems integration here. We'll also be discussing methods for developing and applying KPIs to measure how your Zero Trust program really stacks up to pre-existing mandates. I'm your moderator for this panel, Iris Constant, editor of branded content at GovExec, and today I'm joined by the lovely Jeanette Duncan, who is the Chief Information Officer, Principal Authorizing Official for the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. I am then joined by Kelvin Brewer here. He is the U.S. Public Sector Field CTO for Ping Identity, And then last but certainly not least, Dr. Hauk, who is the Acting Chief Data Officer and Acting Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer as well. And if everyone would give me a round of applause for our lovely panelists here. So, Dr. Hauk, I want to start with you for this first question. What challenges are federal agencies, what challenges is your agency facing in terms of implementing zero trust?
Many challenges. In one sense, the data pillar of zero trust is not generally well understood. And what I see, not just in my agency, but generally around the federal space, is an emphasis more on tooling than on the integration of those tools, because we're not really sure quite how to integrate those tools. So the Department of Defense has put together a very nice framework for zero trust implementation and maturity models that we can follow. But not everybody's in the Department of Defense, not everybody sees what they have done. I think as a practical matter, there's a lot that has to happen to actually implement zero trust, and doing it piecemeal doesn't quite work because it's a paradigm change. It's not something that you just do incrementally. You certainly have to take incremental steps to get to a zero trust, but it's a different framework. It's a different design. It's a different architecture. So you don't just flip a switch or just start, add this component, this component, this component, all of a sudden you have zero trust. It's like a redesign.
Should probably leave this on. Kelvin, I know you talked about this a bit earlier, but what is it, from your perspective, like what challenges are agencies facing right now?
Well, I think Dr. Hauk covered a lot of what what we see as the challenges is the complexity of taking so many different possible point solutions and getting them to work together and communicate properly so that the zero trust framework's actually enforced the way it needs to be enforced, that reporting's happening the way it needs to happen, that anomalies and risk are being identified properly. All those things are, it's a lot to go after. And so let me make a little bit of a, we're here with ATARC'S Zero Trust, right? So one of the things that they've done, and other groups have done this as well, but, I think the ATARC'S Zero Trust Working Group put together a number of labs working with GSIs to put together some frameworks of technology combinations and how they would work together to create a zero trust framework. And I think that's something that we need to rely on as a group trying to create, consistent zero trust in the federal government. Is let's look at examples of frameworks that work, where data's moving around properly, where the technology relationships are already integrated, and the data is being moved around the way it needs to identify risk, to stop bad actors, to do those things that are so important to zero trust without having too heavy of a footprint, right? Because it's really easy for a zero trust solution to become big and bloated more than it needs to be, just because there's so many areas we're trying to address all at once. And so the thing that we need to focus on as an industry, as a government, is doing this in the best way possible, the most secure way possible, with the least footprint possible, so that it's actually manageable and it can scale to the future. Because if it comes in bloated and comes in too big, then what happens is when we go into 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we're looking at it going, this is impossible to support. It's too expensive. It doesn't scale. Now we need to figure out a different way to approach it. And so that's right now what we're trying to do, is figure out how to do a zero trust framework in a way that actually is scalable for the future.
Interesting. And now, Jeanette, I want to turn to you. You have an interesting perspective on this from the defense side. Would you kind of tackle that first question? What challenges is your agency facing, and how are you overcoming those obstacles?
We have lots of help. We have so much help, it's almost problematic. So I would say, this isn't a new journey. We've been on this journey for a number of years now. When the direction came down to move out, we put plans together and we started moving out. But not everybody moved out at the same rate that we did. And two things happened in this past year to help Department of War as a whole and the DAFAs, which is we are a defense field activity, to try to get everybody over the line and meet the 2027 date, right? One is if you are an agency that requires people to be able to access without a CAT card, you had to have a way to do that. So people new to the military, never worked for the government, you don't have a CAT card, but you still need to be able to get into the system to do your clearance. And that's what we do. We do clearances, whether you're a facility, whether you're an individual, whether you're an individual working for a company that needs a facility clearance. That's what we do. Well, it's a big part of what we do. So for us, when we were looking at Zero Trust, it was like, okay, 1.4 million unique logons. We've got to make sure that every one of those people, that the system's up, reliable, and that they can access it. So that didn't necessarily mean you could use CAT cards. So that was the standard when the department first moved out. Everybody's going to use CAT cards. Well, of course, MilDeps and some of us staffers said, hey, no, wait a minute. We have retirees, we have family members, we have people new to the military and or the public sector that need access. So we had to find a way to do that. So we moved out and we did it. And we started moving our systems over. And then here comes the department being helpful. And they gave that mission to another DAFA and said, you will be the group in charge of all the organizations that have to have the ability to access the networks from an ICANN perspective without CAT cards. And so now all of you and all the work you did, you need to now migrate it over to them. Well, they just got the mission. So they weren't ready at that point in time because they just got the mission, they just got the money to make that happen. So now it's, do you have a hybrid approach? Do you continue to move all of your systems to one of two options until the third option catches up? And then do you migrate everything over to it? Or do you take a hub and spoke perspective where you still maintain all of yours and you just make the connection to that other agency so that then they have that and can do that? The other thing that's happened in the near future or recent past, I guess, would be DISA got the mission to accelerate the migration of all the Fourth Estate agencies over to it for network operations. So it was going to be happening over time, and originally we weren't on to even be considered before 2032. Then it was, oh, we forgot about you, but we're going to add you because all agencies must be migrated over by the end of 27. So there's a lot of movement going on in the background because everybody wants to get to Zero Trust. Everybody wants to do it right. You want to have standardized approaches to make the interconnections and the communications efficient and effective. But everybody's at a different place in this journey. And so, that's when we get into the hybrid. You're going to need a hybrid because not everybody's on the cloud. And as we were talking, Kelvin and I were talking, not one tool. We're not all going to be ping users. We're not all going to be Okta users. We're not all going to be Microsoft users. We may have all three in our environments, depending upon the legacy or the age of the systems, how these original systems were set up, versus where we're trying to go. Some of those are highly cloud capable ICAM solutions. But we are getting there, and we're getting there fast. But again, I think we have a lot of help to get there. So for me, when I was looking at that with my folks and my teams, it was, don't just look at what we need to do for ICAM, look at where my trade space is. I can't just keep increasing my bills, my cost. I've got to look at the tools that I have. What can I get rid of? What tools have come out that are going to help to streamline what we need to do? So can I reduce tools in other areas and meet the requirements that those and capabilities that those tools were providing and still move in the direction we need to go? And I think the answer to that was, yeah, we're able to, and we have been moving away from some of the prior tool sets that we were using, consolidating on others that will help us be more mature in the zero trust space.
Amazing. Yeah, it's a work in progress. Like we were saying earlier, it's CMMC or just zero trust in general isn't a destination, but rather an ongoing activity. It's a journey. Exactly, a long one. Michael, I want to pose my next question to you. I believe you're a part of the federal AI community of practice, and so my next question really revolves around KPIs and standardization. What are some of the KPIs that either your agency or agencies in general could use to measure program success, and how do we really standardize that?
There are many questions in your one question.
I love it. Give me all the answers.
I'll touch on a few things. Basic project management has KPIs associated with it. So that's number one. How do we view our project? What are we trying to accomplish with our project? So if implementation of zero trust is a journey, it really does need to have an endpoint, which is a zero trust implementation. And in order to achieve that zero trust implementation, there are certain things that we have to do along the way. So are we getting those done? And each one of those things has subcomponents. So project management 101 is like just basic, or in this case, program management. With respect to monitoring your zero trust implementation, this is where things like DevSecOps, I think, come into play as well. Because there, the concept is that we're going to have a continuous pipeline from our design requirements through our implementation, and that includes testing, and that includes metrics. So basically, metrics have to be collected all along. And then we also need to build into our zero trust framework resilience in the sense that security sidecars and monitoring, so we know when a particular, I'm going towards containerization now, a particular container has been compromised, and then it needs to be destroyed and rebuilt automatically. So these are the kinds of things that can be dashboarded, and we actually can have dashboards. There are some full zero trust implementations in the federal government. I don't think there are many of them, at least I'm just not aware of them, but there are some that are fully mature. And no, I won't say fully mature, they're pretty mature.
98% mature.
Well, pretty mature. There's another area, though, where we can look at metrics or KPIs, and that has to do with this is really so. There's a conundrum that we have to address, which is outside of classified space, certain areas. We have a mandate to make our data public by default. That's legislatively required. The zero trust framework is deny by default. The intersection of everything you get by default and nothing you get by default is zero trust. And that is the intersection then of the entitlements versus the protections on the data. So the lock and key. How are we doing on lock and key? So do we have our locks there? Do we have our keys there? And do they align one for one? So that's really where, myself, I would focus. Not quite the question you asked, but embedded in your question.
I do like that, Kelvin. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that for all you entrepreneurs out there looking at that idea of a KPI dashboard for zero trust, that's an interesting one. But the area that I think, just adding to what's already been said, the area that I think we have to have verifiable measures for is where's our risk exposures at today, and how can we measure those getting lower or higher based on the zero trust implementation we've done, because that's really what we're looking at when you talk about zero trust, is based on what we've implemented today, our policies and the technologies that are in place and the configurations that we've put in place to enforce, training we've done with our people, all these different variables, how much risk are we putting ourselves in based on our existing zero trust framework? And that's something that is going to be different for every agency, every mission, every way it's deployed. But the common variables there are we've got to have an identifiable and agreed upon way to measure risk, and then to be able to say our risk has been this much lower in the last 3 months, 6 months, year, whatever it is, than it was the year before, based on these changes we made to our zero trust framework. And that's really where the rubber hits the road, is how do you measure risk?
You took the question out of my mouth, because I was about to say, how do we measure risk? And I mean, I know this is not really a question on the docket, but Jeanette, I want to pose this one to you. How do you measure risk? What does that look like?
Wasn't a question she gave me to prepare for.
No, it was not.
Measure risk. Gosh, I spent all morning at GMU doing enterprise risk management. Lots of fun there. I think you're measuring risk, then keeping that in mind, you've got risk tolerance, right? So we say threat times opportunity divided by what? Awareness or likelihood. If you want an equation for doing that. But I guess I'm thinking back to all the work we did at Air Force, the work we're doing at DCSA, and there's a lot of basics that we haven't done a great job on. And it makes me think about, access controls, which is why we do ICAM, a foundational part of zero trust. And we haven't always done a really good job. And maybe that's because back when, or over time, we didn't have the tools. Tools have had to evolve and catch up to meet the requirements so that we can do a better job. But then there's always the privileged access management aspect of it. And even if you employ AI to help you automate, or machine learning to help you automate some of these activities, because nobody has the cycles to go through and do it all manually. That's just not possible. A human has to be involved. Somebody's got to be involved to validate the information that you're getting back, to get rid of those false positives to make it better. But then the next part you have to worry about is your threat actors are also teaching your AI what to look for to either gain access or to create havoc in your systems. So I think the metrics are going to evolve as the technology evolves and as we learn and grow more and are better at using it. So I don't think I have an exact or precise answer that says this is the equation or this is the KPI that's going to fit every situation. I think it depends.
That's fair. And I do think you're right on the money there, because I was reading a report earlier that said with AI, there's a shift in now what is risk in title.
I was just going to add that I think with risk in a zero trust framework, you got to look at it from each different category, like identity. You call that micro risk, right? So like in Ping Identity, we're looking at what's the risk of letting this user authenticate? What's the risk of letting this user be authorized to access an app? What's the risk of them then coming out and accessing another app based on what's changed since they accessed the first app? And that's that continuous risk authentication model. And that's really core to zero trust with identity. But that's micro risk, because you're not looking at the whole framework and everything that's happening in regards to what's happening in the SIM, what's happening in the data management system, there's all these other systems involved that also have micro risk being calculated and identified and acted upon, that doesn't have your, like the identity risk calculation is way different than the data risk calculations. And what we need to be able to do is bubble that up to a macro risk level where we can identify the overall risk of what's happening in our zero trust framework. And then we need to look at the holes, which are going to be more in the micro risk area. But that macro risk indicator, that's one of the things that I think we're missing in zero trust, as far as I've seen so far, is that ability to say, overall, we're at, our risk reduction is at this kind of at this place right now at a macro level, and this is where the holes are.
If I could just add, the other way to look at it, though, is like in cybersecurity, the weakest link is where you're vulnerable most.
That's very true. And so, Kelvin, I want to build on what you just said about macro risks here. What strategies would you say are like most effective in terms of ensuring this, continuous improvement or, locking these bad actors out, or to an extent?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting space right now because it's changing. As we've been talking about, especially with the introduction of agentic AI, this whole space is changing. And the big thing that's happening that I see is that when we're introducing agentic AI from the bad actor side, as well as agentic AI from the helpful side on the white hat, or or just simply helping employees do their jobs better side, there's still this risk of needing to involve people to determine how to manage your zero trust framework with all of these new technologies being introduced all the time. And they're things that come with high risk. And what we're seeing is that the risk is increasing quicker than the solutions, and frameworks are adapting to the new risk. And so, one of the things that we need to do is in my opinion, is look at it and say, how do our models need to change based on the new risk variables that are occurring now? And that's something that we're looking at as an organization all the time, is with the pressures we're getting from our existing customers and that we're seeing in changes in the market. It's like, how do we adapt quickly to being able to protect our customers from the risk that's coming? And it's interesting how in the marketplace we as technology vendors make claims that are maybe even outlandish. Like I saw one vendor when I was driving through San Francisco a while back. It was just a couple months ago. I saw in the middle of San Francisco a billboard that said, "We solve all of your agentic AI problems." And I thought, that's a pretty big stake to put in the ground. But marketing. But that's really where we have to adapt as a group in this area of zero trust, is to look at what's coming. We need to have that ability to see a little bit into the future and say, how can we be ready for all these variables that are coming, while still taking care of all the legacy stuff that's still out there, and then adapt our frameworks and our risk models to say, we're ready for agentic AI, let's say, while still supporting operational technology that has no valid solution to upgrade to. And we're in this broad place right now where we have to support so much while still hitting a baseline of protecting our environment.
That is a very bold marketing team. I'm scared of making that statement. Dr. Hauk, do you have any thoughts or ideas on applying strategies for continuous improvement across zero trust?
Yes, and it goes to risk, actually. So there are these individual risks that, like we're talking about. Right. There's also the risk of our implementation federal-wide with respect to zero trust. In that, again, with zero trust, the idea is deny by default. So you need specific entitlements to flow data. And if each individual agency goes out there and gets very aggressive and forward-thinking about implementing their zero trust frameworks, and they have not coordinated their basic standardized on what their data tags need to be, what their entitlements need to be, then basically they'll be creating, okay, well, we can interoperate over here, we can interoperate over here and over there, but we can't interoperate.
Sounds like a bunch of silos.
Yeah, so we want to avoid that because zero trust won't tolerate. But by design, it's a bunch of silos. So the only way the silos can communicate is through some standardized communication mechanism, which is what we really need to be focusing on.
Interesting. So my next question, I'm going to pose it to you, Jeanette. How can agencies really balance this need for modernization, new ICAM systems with, legacy technology? Because rip and replace obviously isn't going to help much, but.
She says balance. I think that's where we get back into the hybrid approach, right? I think one of the things too is for a long time people sat and they said, okay, what is it? What does it mean? What do I do? What is the ideal or perfect solution? And there's no panacea. It's continuous monitoring. It is putting the right tools in place, having people there as that check, the checks and balances of the tools. The infrastructure we run on has been built over years and years and years. It's too expensive to rip out and start over. Nobody can afford to do that. So I guess what I would say is to stop focusing on why you can't do something and tell me how you can. Tell me what you can do, and let's get started. I'm assuming everybody's started, but if you haven't, first time I implemented ICAM was in, I think 2018 at National Endowment for the Arts. And so then when you get to the Department of War and they're just having the conversation, it's like, all right, guys, I get it. You're huge. This takes a lot of effort, but let's get there. And so let's stop making the excuses or looking for why we can't. And so let's start talking about what we can do to get there. And I think, from some of the events I've been at lately and listening to some of the leaders, yeah, they're all about let's get there. Let's get this done. Let's get over the line. And then let's keep up with the continuous monitoring. Let's keep improving our current position, because it's not like you implement it and you're done. It's never one and done. It's going to continue to mature. We're going to continue to learn more. We're going to continue to improve. But just get started.
Yeah, and I agree. There's kind of been this shift, right? Where it started with, well, okay, what is it? How do we do this? How do we do X? And now, I've shifted from writing those articles to now writing about, okay, so how do we measure continuous improvement? And I know, Kelvin, you're nodding along. What are your thoughts on modernization?
Well, I think modernization means that, the strategy has to say we're going to look at modernization while still taking care of the old stuff, right? We still have to protect the old assets that we can't change. And there are, unfortunately, a number of circumstances that I run into all the time working with government is that there's this system here that we have running that has no viable upgrade path. And it has no replacement because the market, and I understand this coming from the market, right? The market there's no demand to create a modern solution for this, but we still need it. We need it doing what it's doing every day, flipping that bit. We need it to happen every day. And so how do we protect those? And that's where I think the greatest tool we have is a whiteboard in that case, because we need to sit down and map it out and figure out how do we create an architecture here to protect those environments, and it's going to be different for every scenario. But how do we protect those environments with, I would say, pieces of the Zero Trust framework? A lot of times you don't need the whole Zero Trust framework to protect it, right? But the core pieces that are needed to protect that solution from things like, foreign actors who are going to bring down utilities that are running on systems that were written in the 1980s. Those are just examples of things that are happening to us today, where you need to say, well, do we firewall that off so it does no connectivity? It's completely disconnected. Still doing what it needs to be doing, but it's disconnected, and we're going to put in front of it a small Zero Trust framework that uses modern technology to protect those solutions. That's where we have to look at how do we do Zero Trust to scale in a way that protects legacy systems while still innovating for new things like agentic AI.
makes sense. And so, Dr. Hauk, apologies. I want to pitch my last question to you here, and then I'll, pitch it down the line. What steps can, federal leaders take to, really prioritize their zero trust efforts, and what do those steps look like?
I'm pushing standards. And when we say federal leaders, this is really everybody has to be involved to create a standard. And I'm confident the vendor community needs these standards, because how are they going to build interoperable solutions without standards? And how is the Department of War and the National Science Foundation and Health and Human Services and National Gallery of Art, et cetera, how are we going to lawfully exchange information that we're required to exchange without some standards? And those standards have to be embodied in common data catalogs and dictionaries, which is one of the efforts that's going forward now as we speak with the federal CDOs. But then the next step, what are the common data tags that we need to attach to our data that describe their availability to others, which then the ICAM solutions have to provide the entitlements for. So it's really got to be a whole effort in order to ultimately succeed. That's not saying people can't take individual steps along the way, but I'm really pushing on the standards.
Makes sense. I'm hearing standards, data tags. I agree. Kelvin, what do you think? Next steps?
I agree. Standards is so important, and the thing that gives you the ability to do is to adapt as technologies change, vendors change. If everybody's built on the same standards, then it makes that process of innovation work better. Because as a vendor myself, nobody's under the illusion that when you acquire ping technology, that's going to be your IDP forever, right? A lot of times a new technology may come out 5 years from now that you've really got to go to for whatever reason because of how they're doing things, and we hope you stay with us, but that's the reality of the market. And so building on standards for zero trust, for identity, all those things is so vital, because then it makes it possible for you to innovate without getting vendor lock-in, because you're using things that aren't built on standards. And so from just a practicality perspective, saving tax dollars, let's all build on standards. Let's create the standards, build on standards, working with NIST, working with CISA, working with these groups to create valid standards and frameworks that technology can follow and build on, so that it makes the process of innovation cheaper.
Amazing. And Jeanette, I'll leave you with the last word.
Preaching to the choir, right? Everybody knows we have to procure the tools that we use. So just a reminder, be agile. Things change, so you have to adapt. I say it 100 times. I know nobody's listening, but I'll say it again. Truly be cloud native. Don't just say you're cloud native, be cloud native, because when we have to acquire, if you're in the federal space, who I do business with today may not be who I am doing business with tomorrow. Things change. Be tool agnostic. It's about being able to meet my requirements, not the name of the tool, and be able to build so that you can adapt and adjust as the threat landscape changes and tools evolve. I mean, for me, I'm always looking for trade space. I'm always looking for ways to be more efficient, to be more effective, to be more streamlined, to simplify the environment, but yet provide that secure environment to meet mission. And so that may mean the tool I have today is not the tool I have tomorrow. So I have to make sure that that we're agnostic and we're doing cloud native things so that we can adapt as the landscape changes.
Amazing. And so we have about 4 minutes left. I know Tom, if he's still
I'm back here.
Oh, hello.
I move
know you're-
around. Yep.
You're just moving and zooming. I
Ready
know
for
you
any
have a few
questions? All right. Who's got the next question?
If anyone has any questions. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, keep asking away then. Okay. I knew somebody would come through. Hang on. Just your name.
Yes. Hi, my name is Fatina Al-Masri, and I have lots of experience in agentic AI and AI agents. Talking with Jeanette and Kelvin.
Here, let's just move over here so they can see us. How about that? We'll get you over
You're
here.
very
There we
far
go.
back.
There's Jeanette.
Thank you so much. I know that everybody is excited about agentic AI. And agentic AI is a bunch of node, and actually I call it in 2 words, network analysis, because you have the node to the atomic level and you grow up. So talking with Jeanette about like when you arrive to hallucination, you need the subject matter for the point that they start, you know, this AI, it does take you to the really unknown world. How you would be able to stop that, special if you guys are applying the agentic AI, how you would be able to arrive to a point that, hey, it's going wrong.
Yeah, and so as Jeanette was just saying, you know, in her agency, they're not deploying any agentic AI right now, and I think that's a lot of us are holding still, waiting for some things like the hallucination issues to get resolved at a more efficient way. But from an identity perspective, the thing that I see is that agents are going to be coming. Where we're going to see it first, in my opinion, is 2 places. One is in workforce enablement, where they can use say a homegrown agentic AI, or one that is provided that they can go in and use as their basically search engine for everything corporate. So everything workforce, they can go in and do searches. Right now we're doing that at Ping Identity. We have an agentic AI agent we're using where I can go in my browser and I can put in a question, and it'll search through all of the repositories that Ping has, and it's all internal, but all the repositories that Ping has, and generate an answer about how I would, let's say, answer a question that a customer just asked me or something. So it's really really cool. You can even ask it to generate a PowerPoint based on the feedback that you know it gave to us, and kick out slides. It's amazing what it does. But one of the things that we've done is put in a framework for how to work with agentic. The other area is around you know, consumer citizen using an agent where they've given the agent permission to act in their behalf. You think about an area where people are going to start using that, they're going to, you know, I could see TurboTax bringing out agentic taxes where the person just feeds in some data and the agent does all of the tax preparation and then submits it to the IRS. And the IRS, how are they going to identify that that's an agent submitting the taxes? You know, there's a lot of things there. But what we really believe is that you've got to have somebody assigned to own the agent, and you've got to have access reviews that happen on a regular basis for whether or not that agent's really getting access to the things they should, or if they have access to things they shouldn't have. And then there's got to be a tight authentication framework around that agent authenticating to do whatever they're going to do. And so those are just kind of the principles that we're building at Ping Identity for our agentic AI solution.
Amazing. You know, I'm already worried I'm doing my taxes wrong, so I don't think I'm ready for the agentic AI to do my taxes just yet, but maybe in the future. I'll try it at least once. Awesome. So guys, we're going to wrap this up here. Thank you so much for joining me for this panel. It was lovely speaking with you. Everyone, if you would, a round of applause. Thank you.
Great
Tom.
panel. Another commercial plug for ATARC. We have an agentic AI group. We have got Microsoft and some of the big players in it. Amazon, I mean. Definitely, it needs to be. I know Landon over here at U.S. Courts, he has his own little personal lab at home and trying to keep those agentic AI agents away from the network at this point. So we're definitely closer to the beginning than the end on that. Our last speaker, we have Frank with Dr. Bill Stryline, and it's good to see Bill. He's back down in D.C. from Boston and MIT. Frank Conkle is our editor-in-chief at GovExec. And he is the recent winner. Nobody knows this, but he's the recent winner of the Icon Award at GovExec. I wasn't even nominated, so it was like very exclusive club, and he's the Icon of the Year. Frank, what does the Icon of the Year at GovExec mean?
Who knows? Who knows? Just I'm iconic, I guess. But enough about me.
Humble man.
We're doing the last panel here today, and I'm going to try to make it interesting and exciting, considering it is the last panel before many of you get out of here. Bill, you're the VP and CTO at Noblis now. Talk a little bit about your current gig, and then we want to get into some really interesting stuff before we conclude.
Oh, of course. Yeah, thank you very much. I am pleased to be here representing Noblis. So I joined Noblis as their CTO about 5 months ago. And my role is to oversee the research agenda within Noblis. We do a lot of research in many technical areas, from basic science to agentic AI systems, from system engineering over to even cybersecurity, of course. My background at Lincoln Laboratory, which is where I was for 25 years, I'm going to be leveraging all of that work and developing capabilities to bring that to Noblis in support of our government clients.
So you just mentioned agentic AI. Everyone's talking about AI. The last panel did as well. Who here, just raise your hand if you feel like we're at a bit of an inflection point with artificial intelligence? Good chunk, good chunk. Who here is familiar with the company Anthropic? Most folks? A lot of news around Anthropic. There's lots of ways we can get into that. But what's interesting to me is a report that came out in November. And the title of this report is Disrupting the First Reported AI Orchestrated Cyber Espionage Campaign. Now, that's a long-winded title. But I think what it is the first time that we're seeing AI actually used to orchestrate legitimate espionage activity. And this was conducted with high confidence by the a Chinese state-sponsored group. And they basically commandeered Claude. Most people are familiar with Claude, right? A lot of us use it in our day-to-day now. And the Defense Department uses it, and large chunks of the government. But also, bad actors do too. And so, Bill, I want you to talk a little bit about this report, because I feel like it is a bit of an inflection point where you can use agents to do your bidding. I think the term was jailbreak. They were able to jailbreak Claude to do a bunch of bad stuff.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating report. If you haven't seen it, you can just do a search for Anthropic Cybersecurity Report. It's not too long to read. You can even use AI to summarize it for you if you want. I did that, and then I read the whole thing. And like you said, what's really fascinating about it is they, despite the protections that they had put in place on their models, ways to, if you will, guardrails to keep nefarious use at bay, the nefarious actors were able to circumvent that. Now, the techniques that they found were in use to circumvent the guardrails are things that people had actually known about for a while. Things like asking the AI to pretend you're telling me about a potential attack, or we're doing this for security reasons. Please tell me what would be the most insecure part of this network. But they kept pressing on it, and the model eventually folded and gave them what they needed to do. The part that's really, like you said, about an inflection point about this is the previous sort of examples of that breach of guardrails just resulted in information, which I don't mean to say just, information is also incredibly valuable. But in an agentic system, that meant that you could now take action, and the actors could then say in service, convince the model, if convince is the right word for this, at least fool the model into believing that it was doing this for security purposes, and then take action to attack something. And if you read the report, you'll find that it actually found the crown jewels of the network it was going after, and then leveraged some zero-day exploits to compromise the network and then steal data. It's just amazing when you read it. To me, I've been in cybersecurity for a while, and this was a demonstration of sort of what we were thinking was going to happen at some point. And I'm not sure that we have a defense for this. Guardrails continue to get better, but they get better basically because people make them better. And this kind of example shows us that people don't move fast enough to stop an attack from an agentic system like this.
Yeah, I want to read a couple excerpts of it, and I want you to think about how folks in the audience should think about preparing for this era that we're in, where these AI tools can be used to such an effect. And in phase one, human operators chose relevant targets. They developed an attack framework, and this framework used Claude code in automated fashion to carry out cyber operations. Then they convinced Claude, which is trained to avoid bad behavior, to actually engage in this activity. So, you know, my brain as a kid in the, you know, late 80s, early 90s, watching things like Terminator and Skynet, gets to working about, okay, how this is quite interesting and almost science fiction, but definitely very much real. So they jailbroke this code. They then convinced the code that that those users were employees of a legitimate cyber firm, and basically then unleashed it. And then the second part of the attack was having Claude inspect the organization's cyber posture and defenses before, as you said, utilizing a bunch of zero-day attacks to great effect. So then this happens really quick, and this happens faster than people can orchestrate this stuff. It happens at the blink of an eye. So with that said, I mean, how do we start defending against these kinds of things?
I mean, it is, you know, kind of, it is an arms race, if you will, but one that we don't want to lose control of the arms that we want to bring to the fight, if you will. And this is an example where that has happened. They've commandeered one of our cyber weapons, which in this case it was Claude. I think we have to rethink, you know, and they've released some reports after this, some notices that they're changing the way that they detect guardrails. They're using more of a behavioral recognition approach, recognizing behavior from the output of the model that could be nefarious, as opposed to trying to just stop the behavior in the first place. And that and other sorts of things are what we're going to need. I think we need to do a lot more testing, to be honest. You know, one of the things that you and I talked about in preparation for this is the shift in general in the corporate world and certainly in the government world in how they think about responsible AI. And of course, guardrails are a big component in responsible AI. I think red teams are critically important here. So certainly these companies have people that try to break the models, try to get them to do what they don't want to do. I think we need to continue to augment that. You know, use agentic AI system, agentic systems against agentic systems to keep accelerating that. And what we can learn from that is ways that the models can be compromised and then hopefully protect against it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if we're just in a landscape soon where it is agentic AI and agentic AI going up against each other, and we watch these things.
Have you been to Moltbook? Anybody heard about Moltbook? It's a social network for AI. Basically, it's if you haven't.
I saw this on X, right?
Yeah, this is great. They don't let people in because you can't pass the test fast enough.
Is anyone in the audience familiar with what we're talking about, or is it a little bit? Okay, we got
a few hands over there.
Yeah, we got a few nerds left. Let's go. So getting into, I mean, what's that? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I as someone who writes about this stuff, I try to think objectively, but I also, it's hard not to be a little fearful of like the moment that we are in, because, you know, just stepping back, I saw the CEO of Google give a talk recently, and he said 35% of all the code that they're writing is written by AI. Same thing with OpenAI, Anthropic, even more so. Like, these companies are, AI is playing such a great role, and then you can get into stuff like our economic situation, where so many of the largest investments have to do with data centers and AI capability. Will those returns on investment pay off? If they don't, what happens? If they do, what happens? There's a lot of different ways you could go. But one thing that is happening now, I think, and it's impossible to avoid seeing, is the ubiquitous of AI and content now. Now, for news gathering purposes, I'm always on X, always paying attention to what's trending and who's saying what and that sort of thing. This is something you notice as well. No, I mean, the amount that AI is being used to create content, realistic content, plays a role in our politics. It plays a role in a lot of different societal factors.
Absolutely. I mean, it is a tool, and just, you know, from the coding perspective, I am all for using AI to code. I started my career as a software engineer. I loved it. I love doing it. But here's a tool that can do that for you. And the best thing about using it for that is it can create code very quickly, and we have capabilities to verify it. We have automated mechanisms, unit testing, we have regression tests, we have these suites. It's one unique area where we know how we can test the validity of the output. When I was in the department a couple of years ago, we visited a corporation down in Austin that they write test suites for hardware. And they had told us that they had basically changed the way that they had written test suites, which had been done by hand, to use AI systems to do it. Now, they would typically say, well, we'll give you we'll give you a contract that's 6 to 9 months to develop this. They had turned that into basically a 3 to 4 week process now, which is incredibly cost effective. And because we have these test suite capabilities, they could prove that they were appropriate. But back to content, I think code is kind of a content, if you will. It's another language. But I think I don't know what to say about it other than that we all have become we all should be able and be very guarded when we look at any content that we see. When I'm on a social network or something like that, Facebook or something, one of the things I do is I often look right at the comments, and other people are telling me, hey, this is AI. Look at the number of fingers on that person. That's an AI. And I do that actually even before I let the video play all the way out and go, okay, well, this has obviously been created by somebody to cause me to think or feel a certain way. I think that's going to be the norm. I'm not sure where that leads, but at least I have confidence, I have hope that people will not take anything at face value and consider other sources for verifying what we're seeing.
Just yesterday, my old man, he's a retired dairy farmer, and he called me up, and he talks in a very simple kind of way, but he's like, hey, I just read this thing on Facebook. Well, is it true? Is this true? And he goes to me as a source of truth.
Well, you're an icon. So.
I am, yeah. But I mean, and I'm his oldest son. But I mean, this is the world that we're in. I mean, you got folks of that generation that really do need a source of truth, and you need to verify. You mentioned you need to be more guarded. Let's talk about guardrails. The previous panel addressed that a little bit too. But think back to your time at DoD. I mean, these scenarios are unfolding right now in real time. How should we be thinking about guardrails? How should the federal government be thinking about guarding against sort of the ramifications of bringing AI into the government at the speed at which we are doing so?
I'm an advocate for using AI. I will just say that. I think it's sort of like the wave is coming. There's no way to stop it. I also think there's great benefit from it. It's also the type of technology, in my assessment, that we benefit from using it more and more. I don't think you can predict how we're going to be able to use it. I don't think you can predict, as we're seeing from generative systems, what kind of output's going to come from it. But they're producing output so quickly that means we can try multiple times. And the more we experiment, the more we get used to how we work with it. So I think experimentation and sort of being very bullish on its use is the right way to go. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is I think the global context is we're not the only ones with this technology, and there are other nations that are using it in that way without regard for ethical considerations or concerns for the public. So I think we'll fall behind if we don't use it as much as we possibly can. But we will learn a lot from using it that we can incorporate into our workflows, we can incorporate into our protection mechanisms, and, as you were saying, into our guardrails. I think that, back to one of the things we talked about was the shift in thinking about responsible AI in the last 4 or 5 years. It used to be we were thinking about responsible AI from the perspective, let's build it in. Let's look at the data first to see if there's bias before we even feed it to the model. What has happened is there's been a real shift to be much more focused on compliance. And that's sort of like the red teaming idea. And I don't know, it's an interesting sort of development, and we've seen several large companies do away with their ethics boards because of this sort of thing and have gone more to a compliance approach.
Right, Microsoft is one of those, right?
That's exactly right. And Meta and Google have all done sort of similar things. That is aligned with this approach to being more experimental with the capability. You don't know what you're going to, you can't necessarily control what goes into the model, but you can look on the outside of it and see if you can detect when it's wrong. That's kind of the idea.
Yeah, the Defense Department has taken a much more aggressive approach to bringing in technology and I guess more of a less risk-averse tact. I mean, what's your take on that? It does feel like there's more engagement with companies that may be non-traditional government contractors that have disruptive capabilities. They want those as fast as they can get them. in a matter of months, not years.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally the Department of Defense, now the Department of War, but the Department of Defense was risk averse, and I think this is sort of flying in the face of that. This technology doesn't favor the risk averse, and I don't mean that it really cares. I just mean that our ability to use it is improved and enhanced the more we experiment with it. We don't really know. I used to call it alien tech, basically, and I still think that applies. It's like a piece of technology appeared in our front yard. Pick your favorite movie from the 80s in which that happens. It's got blue lights. You don't know what it does. You push a button and all of a sudden a tree disintegrates. You're like, wow, what is that used for? Oh, I might use it for this. The thing, and that's cool as long as you're the only one with that blue light technology there. But the thing is, this technology is showing up in the front doors or front yards of basically a lot of our adversaries, and they are willing to push all of the buttons to see what it can do. We have to do the same thing. So I think that with that experimentation, I don't think we should stop ourselves, sort of kneecap ourselves before we know what is possible, but we need to create safe spaces in which we are able to try it out and see what it does. I think that what goes along with that is education. I think this was mentioned on the previous panel. The more people experiment with it, the more they get used to it, the more I trust people will learn. They'll get burned once or twice when the thing is giving them bad information and they pass it on as their own. And they'll realize, oh, well, this did give me an answer quickly, but I better check the answer before I send it out. So I think I have trust that people will learn how to use it better.
And it seems like that is the case. I mean, the last 3 years, year over year, there's been a 15% increase in the amount that the federal government has spent on AI technology, and I can't imagine that's going to slow down anytime soon. Now, Bill, you're in the digital transformation space now. What does that look like, and especially from focus of government folks and people who serve the government? What should they be incorporating as they think about digital transformation? We talk about that phrase is kind of old, but it's an ongoing, ever evolving process, I would think.
Yeah, that we often get asked that. One of the key things that we do at Noblus actually is to help our clients understand what that term means and help them make that transformation. The way I interpret it is basically when you have been able to digitize your workflow, your environment, you're able to manipulate it, you're able to understand it, to sort of consider what the implications are if different things are tried. It also means you're upgraded, you're aware of the transformation that's happening. And I think, again, on the last panel, we talked about the speed of innovation, how new technologies are coming around all the time. It requires us to be nimble with what we actually have to do in our mission and not be so beholden to the ways that we're doing it. A mission is basically, you want to accomplish an outcome. That's what a mission is about. But I think what's happened over time, and we're trying to get away from in digital transformation, is that the process we use to produce that output is written in stone and the only way to get there. Digital transformation says there might be a new way to do it. Maybe we use AI systems. Maybe we use a new agentic system to get there. Maybe humans play a different role in the workflow. Certainly now, from a digital perspective, that means we're going to be digitizing a lot of our artifacts and be manipulating them online.
Yeah, I just did an interview last week with the OPM director, and one of their big efforts for the year is, for the next couple years, is digitizing the retirement records that are stored in a mine that's like, I don't know, several hundred feet below. It's in Pennsylvania somewhere. He was talking about it. But I mean, that's just one small example of a broader issue the government's tackling right now. Got a couple minutes left. I get asked questions all day, but I usually feel like audience questions are better. Now I know y'all are probably tired and had a nice big lunch. I thought the lunch was actually quite good. But think of some questions. Tom can go around with the mic. If we got one, would love to put Bill on the spot here.
Is anybody using agentic AI in their enterprise? Or any questions? We got a question over here. Yeah. All right. What do you got? Do you got some?
Oh,
you don't have any. Okay.
She was just saying that she does use agentic AI. Really, no questions. I guess. Okay. I mean.
Oh, there's one over there.
No. Yeah. Go ahead.
Right. I got one too, but yeah. Okay. Just your name and agency.
All right.
I'm going to hold the mic.
All right. Ricardo, Department of Labor. A question is, recently, it's been in the news recently where Claude a personalized open AI that is able to do its own, which was recently, the author was recently acquired by Open AI. And so what I'm asking is, with this new platform and how AI is able to do things automatically by itself, not where we're building use cases and it's transforming and doing things, how do you think that's going to transform? And where do you think those protections will be, because those are really agentic in a different way?
So I wasn't tracking that. It was, you're saying OpenAI purchased a company that had this capability, or is this an offering from Open? Oh yeah. So this relates to our comment earlier about Moltbot, about systems that are able to do things all on their own and generate things. I think it's fantastic, to be honest. I think we're demonstrating, in a sense, this capability is a result of human ingenuity, right? We've been able to build a machine that can do things autonomously, can do things intelligently, decide on its own what it's going to be, what it needs to do in order to accomplish a goal. I think, to be honest, I think Moltbook, what we were referring to earlier, the social network for agentic systems, I don't know that it's really going to lead anywhere. I don't believe that these systems have real drive in, like they're really trying to accomplish anything. They've been set on a path by a human who's told them, hey, go interact with this. And because they're receiving language, which is their basic input, they know how to process that and then produce that. It's sort of a self-feeding ecosystem, if you will, in a language that you can understand, which humans can understand. But they don't really have a drive. They're not really trying to accomplish anything like we are. They're not trying to survive. They don't even know what survive means. It's just a word to them. So I think we're years from anything that is going to be like what people often call AGI, that really is able to accomplish individual goals, if you will, or personal goals of the system. But because we've never seen anything like this before, I think we often get fooled and think that we're there. But I don't think we are.
Your comment about Moltbook is interesting because a few months ago, toward the end of 2025, I was in Las Vegas for a conference. And have any of you guys ever used Waymo before or familiar with Waymo? Basically, premise is like Uber, but you get a driverless vehicle. And we'll go to that guy in a second, in the middle there, Tom. Anyway, in Vegas, they're piloting it at the time that I was at this conference. So I was like, I got to try this out. So I downloaded the app and tried it out. Well, the cars, they can only drive certain places in Vegas, and it's usually around the Strip to a lot of the really prominent areas like Caesars and all that. But what I thought was really weird is if you go where the cars are hanging out, it's a bunch of driverless vehicles in a couple of big parking lots, and they're just like driving by themselves sporadically, and they kind of drive up to each other and then they stop, almost like they're talking to each other. And I was like, this is fucking weird. Like this is strange, But this is, as you're talking about Moltbook, this is like kind of people chilling in their own place. These cars, they don't have people in them that are just driving around, Anyway. That's
then
neither
they
here
found
nor
out
there, and I'm tired too. But
they had some Filipinos backing them up. Did you hear about that? They had a group out of Philippines.
I heard about that.
Backing them up in case it was raining. They didn't report that though, so they were being remotely controlled by a center in Philippines.
That's even scarier.
Here is this guy. Does this guy have a name?
Mark Kagan at Panoptis Intelligence. Speaking of 1980s movies, have you seen anything? I just found the article because I just had read it recently about at King's College, they had run a scenario with 3 different AI tools playing war games. Remember that movie? 21 war games with 395 scenarios in which Claude and 2 others, in most cases, as they went up the escalation scale, they all, most of them went to nuclear weapons.
You saw that
and
too,
this
right?
was without a human in the loop. Any comments on that because I'm a hard sci-fi fan since I was a kid, Trekkie par excellence and all this, and the idea of Google writing 30 or 40% of its code, and they don't know what the hell is in that because human hasn't touched that. really scares the hell out of me for, I think, some really rational, logical reasons. So, any comments on those war games?
I hadn't read that. Have you read it? Did you want to comment?
You're the expert.
Okay, well, I'm not an expert in war games, but I will go read that. Thank you for pointing that out to me. Okay, thank you. My first thought is that something, I think various workflows, various use cases, the risk associated with them is not the same. Something like that, certainly you should have a human involved. I mean, that you use a tool like an AI system to help you think through the scenarios, and when something like that of such high stakes as it play, we have to consider all of the aspects of it. We shouldn't take anything at face value and really consider what it can be used for. Something like code, though, back to that point, I really don't have a problem with AI writing a lot of code, because as we were saying earlier, we have mechanisms to verify the code is working. We have, the same test that you would use to verify that a human code is appropriate for releasing. We can use those tests against this code. And so in that way, I think we can feel more confident that the that the code is doing what we want it to do.
And I shouldn't have said this guy. I should have said young, distinguished gentleman right here in the middle. I would say I read that report, and I thought it was really interesting. And it's actually a really interesting tie-in to what's going on in the news right now, because at some point tomorrow we expect the Defense Department to make a decision about this back and forth with Anthropic, because Anthropic has a large contract with the Pentagon, $200 million contract to use its large language model, Claude, in national security systems. And actually, Anthropic's been doing a lot of work with military and intelligence community for going back 3 or 4 years, actually, through AWS. So whether they're going to decide to play ball, Anthropic has a couple of criteria they don't want to sort of meet the DoD on yet. We'll see what happens. But that gets to your point, because the war games that you're talking about, most of the outcomes ended in nuclear war when AI was in charge of the decision making, right? That's what the gist was. And one of Anthropic's criteria is that they don't want humans out of the loop in lethality decisions. I would say nuclear war is about the most important lethality decision there is. So, I was thinking about that too, and I'm glad you asked that question.
We've got another question over here, but does anybody remember in war games, what was the only way to win the game? Don't play the game.
Thank you. This is Sumit Nanda from Deloitte. And great discussion, Frank and Will. Right. Kind of piggyback on the same question of wargaming. As we are evolving from AI-enabled threat detection as well as defense and as well as offense to more AI driving the defense and offense, what about accountability, right? That always kind of, as we mature, the AI agentic field is going to take more and more critical decisions, right? It is not possible for a human to be always in the loop, right? And they will make mistakes. And on a high value stakes like pushing a nuclear button, right? Or impact to people's health and various other critical decisions from infrastructure standpoint. What's your view on that?
That's a great question. I think we have no choice but to consider all of the use cases that are relevant here. I don't think we can avoid it. I don't think we can not use AI, especially in places where the adversary is able to move faster than we are, right? I like cyber as a domain for AI because it's a domain where you can really let the AI do. It can go at the speed of the domain, basically. And I think what we need to do is to give AI the ability, the things that we would allow it to do automatically, but those things that require, that impact more people, that impact more systems, maybe those get bubbled up to what a human has to review. There are other domains that don't have to move as fast as cyber. There's kind of one of the things I've been thinking about recently is that AI systems allow you to move really fast. And I mean that in a general sense, but specifically, even like an LLM, if you ask it a question, maybe you want it to review some data for you, give you a synopsis of something, it can give it to you very, very quickly. The risk or the sort of tendency is to just take that and say, wow, look at all that time I saved. It didn't take me a week to read those 10 reports and write the summary. It only took the system, literally like 5 minutes or less than that to give me a well-formed report. Often you think, well, I've gained a week back. We should rethink that and say we really didn't gain a week back. What we gained back was a week to verify that output. And so it might take us 2 days to verify the output, just like we had an intern producing that for us. We've still gained 3 days. That's much better than if we had done it by ourselves, which would have taken 5 days. We've gained 3 days back. And I think I don't want people to be lured into this feeling like time is the only dimension that is important here. Quality is really important. Accountability is really important. And keeping those in mind as we think about how to integrate AI, I think that will part of education here, but it'll really make us use it better.
Yeah, that was a really good question. I would say one other thing too is, we almost make light of the fact that, there are decisions like pressing the nuclear button, but really when you think about the federal government and the millions of different ways it impacts everyday people, if you had an AI program that did something without a human in the loop, that impacted someone's Social Security benefits, tax processing. I mean, I don't want to get audited and have screwed up my tax return that way, like the previous panel was talking about. There's a lot of ways that you can mess up someone's life really short order with inappropriate or, AI gone wild.
One more question?
Sure, yeah, we're way over, man, but,
Time's just a concept.
Hey,
Time is a flat circle.
Buckles, Department of State. One really interesting thing is that AI is such a dynamic field, right? It's changing so quickly. We have these models that are changing almost every 6 months. One of the things that I'm kind of concerned about is from an accountability perspective, you've done all this testing and deployed a model from this point and now, but when you go and do the swap and replace, it's like sometimes potentially you put an entirely different person in by the time you swap out the model 6 months later when the latest technology comes along. So it's just one of those concerns that are the models to test the models that we're deploying? Do you think that we're going to be able to keep up and be able to make sure that we can maintain that accountability? Because as a government employee, I have to be able to explain how we came up with the decisions that we're making, what we did, and sometimes being able to recreate what the processes is almost impossible. So the taxpayer can't be told, well, we made this decision based on this and this, but now it's kind of becoming like a black box where we're getting answers and not able to provide the taxpayers the understanding of how we're making decisions, right?
Yeah, I like that question because traceability or interpretability is a really interesting field from an AI perspective. I mentioned the alien tech sort of reference there. They are black boxes. I mean, you can do what you want to prepare the data, but it may or may not follow the data that you've provided in the way that you think it's going to. So I like this area of research. I'm really excited by what's going on there. Some of the things that I've seen that are very promising are neurosymbolic approaches, where you have a neural network, which is the core of an LLM, but alongside it, internally, as it's moving, as it's moving through its statistics to come up with an answer, you're sort of tracking that and keeping waypoints along the way in symbols that you can then use to explain its logic. There are other ways to do that you can sort of track what's going on. Those are absolutely critical for understanding what's there. I still think, though, that to our earlier point, I think we are moving into an era when we have to be in a point where we can judge good based on its output as opposed to how we got to the output. That for me is a fundamental shift in understanding sort of intelligence products from an intelligence. I don't mean intelligence products, although that could be it. We have relied a lot on the process and said the process is sound, therefore it has to produce a good result. If we don't have visibility into the process, we need another way of making sure that what we see is good, which is why content is so difficult right now, because we look at things, and previous to this era, if somebody had the wherewithal, the resources to produce a video, we would trust it, right? But now you can, at the push of a button, create a video. And so we have to be able to have critical thinking to be able to evaluate something.
Really,
well, that's true.
The one thing I learned from a former mentor was as advice to be a manager, the phrase "you've been managed," Anyway, I'm not a great manager, but Bill, thanks for the
thank you very much
conversation. I'm going to go Google neurosymbolic. I wrote it down because I didn't want to feel too stupid after sharing the stage with you.
Yeah.
But thank you. And if you want to lightly accost Bill on the way out, I'm sure he'll take more questions on this topic.
Thank you very much.
That was fantastic. If you all can hang out for another hour, I've got a keynote. No, I'm just kidding. We're at the end. I want to thank everybody. Great panel, guys. I want to thank all of our partners. We had some really good interaction with them today. I'd like to thank my staff who are about ready to go after a couple days work getting this. Thank you, GovExec team, ATARC team, fantastic. And I'd like to thank all of you for sticking this out. I think Bill was fantastic. It was good to hear from him. He always makes you think. And we'll see you at the next event. Thank you.
Thanks again, man. Great event. Good seeing you.